Days of Future Past. This story alone permanently changed the vibe of the X-Men. It jumps into a future where mutants basically lost. The Sentinels, those giant mutant hunting robots, took over North America and turned the world into a nightmare police state. Mutants were hunted down, locked in camps, or killed. And eventually regular humans started losing their freedom too. And this future didn't feel impossible. It felt like the natural result of humanity's fear and hatred finally going too far. The surviving X-Men are exhausted, traumatized, and barely hanging on as they attempt one last desperate mission to stop this future from ever happening. The comic is filled with moments that stuck in fans' minds for decades. One of the most famous is seeing Wolverine get blasted by a Sentinel so hard that his flesh is burned away, leaving only his adamantium skeleton standing there for a second before collapsing. The future itself also feels incredibly hopeless. Heroes are dead everywhere, cities feel empty and militarized, and the remaining mutants live with the constant fear of extermination. The animated adaptation made it even more haunting, with a giant cemetery filled with fallen X-Men names, really showing how badly things spiraled out of control. And Marvel never fully escaped this storyline. The idea of mutants being wiped out by Sentinels kept returning again and again in X-Men stories because that fear became part of the franchise's identity. Characters like Nimrod and the Sentinel program continued haunting the mutants long after the original story ended. Even when the X-Men win, there's always this feeling that the future could still happen if things go wrong. And that lingering sense of doom is what made the story legendary instead of just another alternate timeline comic. God Loves, Man Kills. It is one of the most serious and uncomfortable X-Men stories ever written because it barely hides what it's really about. Instead of focusing mainly on superheroes fighting robots or cosmic threats, the story is about religious extremism, hate, and persecution. The main villain, William Stryker, is a fanatical preacher who convinces people that mutants are evil and against God's plan. He calls mutants children of Satan and spreads fear through television, speeches, and manipulation, turning ordinary people into angry followers willing to support violence against mutants. And what makes it disturbing is how believable everything feels. Stryker doesn't come across like a cartoon villain. He feels like someone who could genuinely exist. The story becomes even darker because of how personal the hatred gets. Stryker's forces kidnap Professor X and mentally torture him in order to broadcast anti-mutant propaganda directly into people's minds. At the same time, younger mutants like Kitty Pryde become targets simply for existing. And near the end, Stryker kidnaps Kitty, who is still just a child, and prepares to publicly execute her in front of cheering supporters. That scene is what really shows how dangerous blind hatred became in the story. Another reason God Loves, Man Kills stayed so powerful over the years is because of characters like Nightcrawler. If you don't know, he is deeply religious himself, so seeing someone use the same fate to justify cruelty completely shakes his worldview. The comic constantly asks uncomfortable questions about how religion, fear, and prejudice can become twisted into weapons against marginalized groups. Even decades later, the themes still feel painfully relevant, which is why so many fans consider it one of the most important X-Men stories ever written. It's not disturbing because of gore or horror monsters, it's disturbing because the hatred in the story feels very real. Secret Wars. When we talk about Secret Wars, it is a symbol of multiversal chaos. And while there are two major Secret Wars events, one from 1984 and the other from 2015, both serve as turning points in Marvel history. The first was a classic heroes versus villains clash, while the second was an apocalyptic restructuring of the entire multiverse. The original Secret Wars begins when a mysterious cosmic entity called the Beyonder becomes fascinated by Earth's superheroes, and to observe the nature of good and evil, he teleports a bunch of Marvel's most iconic heroes and villains to a patchwork planet called Battleworld. There, they are forced to fight for survival, power, and philosophy. You've got the Avengers, X-Men, and Fantastic Four clashing with villains like Doctor Doom, Ultron, and Galactus, and many more. And it's also the event that gave Spider-Man his iconic black suit, which, surprise, turns out to be the Venom symbiote. While the first Secret Wars was all about epic battles and big team-ups, Secret Wars 2015 was a whole different beast. In this modern retelling, the multiverse is collapsing. Earth after Earth is being destroyed in a series of incursions where parallel worlds crash into each other. The Illuminati, a secret group of powerful heroes like Reed Richards, Iron Man, and Doctor Strange, try to stop it but fail. And in the chaos, Doctor Doom seizes the power of the Beyonders, reshaping the remnants of the multiverse into a twisted new battle world, where he reigns as God Emperor Doom. And this new battle world is stitched together from fragments of destroyed universes, zombie lands, mutant kingdoms, dystopias, and more. Heroes and villains alike are reshaped, memory wiped, or twisted to fit Doom's rule. But a small group of survivors from the original universe, including Reed Richards, Black Panther, and Miles Morales, fight to expose the truth. In the end, Reed outsmarts Doom, checks his power, and rebuilds the multiverse, restoring everything that was lost. So it's not just a reboot, it's Marvel's rewriting its entire reality, with purpose and closure. Both Secret Wars stories are cosmic in scale but very different in tone. The first is a high-stakes brawl with a storyline behind it, fun, chaotic, and classic, and the second is an existential drama that closes out years of Marvel continuity and launches something new. Mutant Massacre. It's a landmark crossover event that ran through various X-Men related titles, including Uncanny X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants. Written primarily by Chris Claremont and Louis Simonson, the storyline is a grim and violent tale that solidified the X-Men's status as underdogs. The story starts off with the Marauders, a team of ruthless assassins led by Mr. Sinister, launching an attack on the Morlocks, a group of outcast mutants living in the sewers beneath New York City. Mr. Sinister orders the massacre to eliminate genetically undesirable mutants, initiating a bloody campaign that leaves the Morlocks nearly extinct. Hearing of the attack, the X-Men and their allies descend into the Morlock tunnels to stop the slaughter, but they have no idea what's waiting for them. So the X-Men, led by Storm, enter the tunnels and engage the Marauders in brutal battles. Many X-Men are injured, including Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Shadowcat, who is left in a critical state. X-Factor, posing as mutant hunters to secretly help mutants, also become involved. Their mission brings them into conflict with the Marauders and the X-Men, as misunderstandings create tension between the groups. Angel is gravely injured during the rescue mission, his wings pinned to a wall by Harpoon. This injury leads to gangrene and ultimately the amputation of his wings. Thor becomes involved after discovering the aftermath of the massacre. He uses his powers to cremate the fallen Morlocks, granting them a warrior's burial. So this massacre underscores the dangers mutants face even within their own community. The Morlocks are killed not just because of their mutation, but because they represent the undesirable aspects of mutant kind. Like the other crossover events, Mutant Massacre had a lasting impact on the X-Men universe. The event set the stage for Angel's evolution into Archangel, one of the most significant character developments in X-Men history. The Marauders became recurring villains, and the injuries suffered by some of the X-Men forced them off the front lines for a time, leading to major roster changes and new dynamics within the team. Mutant Massacre is a harrowing and unforgettable chapter in X-Men's history. It showcases the X-Men at their most vulnerable state, fighting not just to save lives, but to survive against overwhelming odds. Kraven's Last Hunt. It's a 6-issue Spider-Man story arc published in 1987, written by J.M. DeMatteis with art by Mike Zeck. It is widely regarded as one of the darkest and most psychologically intense Spider-Man stories ever told. In the story, Kraven the Hunter is at the end of his career. He is consumed by his obsession with proving himself superior to Spider-Man, so he sees his life as incomplete unless he can defeat Peter in both body and spirit. His plan is to ambush him, then shoot him with a tranquilizer dart and bury him alive in a coffin, which he did. Believing Spider-Man to be dead, Kraven made a replica of his costume to prove he can surpass him as a hero. So he begins patrolling the city as Spider-Man, but his methods are obviously brutal and violent, tarnishing the real Spider-Man's reputation. Kraven unleashes Vermin, a villain with cannibalistic tendencies, to solidify his dominance over Spider-Man. Vermin had previously been defeated by Peter and Captain America together, but Kraven defeats him single-handedly, demonstrating his physical and mental superiority. Then Spider-Man awakens, clawing his way out of his grave, which marks his refusal to give up and his determination to reclaim his identity and stop Kraven. After Peter confronts Kraven, the Hunter declares his victory complete, claiming he has proven himself the superior man, and having achieved his goal, Kraven releases Vermin and takes his own life with a rifle, leaving behind a note that expresses his satisfaction and peace. The story doesn't shy away from violence, especially in Kraven's brutal impersonation of Spider-Man and Vermin's gruesome acts of cannibalism. And the iconic image of Spider-Man clawing his way out of the grave is still to this day one of the most powerful and enduring visuals in Marvel history, symbolizing his unyielding spirit. And Kraven's death is shocking and final, marking one of the few times in comics that a major villain's story ends in such a definitive way, redefining Kraven as a tragic, complex villain and showcase Spider-Man's resilience, proving why he remains one of Marvel's most enduring and inspiring heroes. This late 80s crossover turned New York City into a literal hell on Earth. It all starts with Madeline Pryor, Cyclops' ex-wife, who just found out she's a clone of Jean Grey, makes her deal with demons from Limbo to get revenge on basically everyone who wronged her. She becomes the Goblin Queen, and the barriers between Limbo and Earth start to break down. One of the coolest and creepiest parts of Inferno is how New York itself becomes possessed. Mailboxes sprout cheat, mannequins come to life, cars turn into literal monsters, and the city is bathed in this eerie red glow. It's not just demons you have to worry about. The environment itself is out to kill you, and this gives the event a tone that's completely different from most Marvel crossovers. The X-Men and X-Factor are at the heart of the story, and they are dealing with a lot of emotional baggage while fighting off the invasion. Madeline's transformation into the Goblin Queen isn't just a random villain turn, it's the tragic result of being abandoned, manipulated by Mr. Sinister, and having her entire life exposed as a lie. And that personal pain fuels the invasion and makes the conflict way more than just punching demons. Of course, this being a Marvel event, you get huge battles. The New Mutants team up with Magic, whose connections to Limbo makes her central to the fight. The Avengers and Spider-Man get dragged in too, since well, you can't exactly ignore a demonic apocalypse happening in Manhattan. The emotional climax hits when the heroes finally confront Madeline, leading to a heartbreaking battle where Jean Grey is forced to merge with the Phoenix Force again and absorb Madeline's memories. This restores some balance but also leaves everyone shaken. Cyclops in particular, since he has to grapple with the fallout of Madeline's death and the revelation that their child, Nathan Summers, future Cable, was a major part of Mr. Sinister's plan. This event mixes soap opera drama, supernatural horror, and over-the-top comic book action into one package. It's not just another invasion, it's a citywide possession that forces every hero to face their inner demons, sometimes literally. And it's easily one of the most unique crossover events Marvel's ever done. Executioner's Song. The early 1990s were absolute madness for Marvel, and nowhere was that more obvious than in the X-Men line. The mutants were at the height of their popularity. Toys, cartoons, record-breaking sales, the whole thing. So when Marvel announced a massive crossover called Executioner's Song, fans expected something legendary. It ran through X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, X-Factor, and X-Force, and the big promise was simple. This story would finally reveal the mysterious origin of Cable. So in here, Professor X is nearly assassinated by a mysterious villain called Strife, a masked terrorist with Cable's exact powers and appearance. Almost immediately, the story frames Cable as the prime suspect. The X-Men turn against him, believing he may have tried to murder their mentor. This creates tension across multiple teams as X-Force, X-Factor, and the main X-Men all collide while trying to uncover the truth. It's a great hook. Hero hunted, mentor dying, and secrets about to explode. But here's the problem. The entire event is built on a promise it never actually delivers. For dozens of issues, the story teases that Cable's origin are about to be revealed. Characters dance around the truth, hints are dropped, flashbacks are teased, and by the time the story finally ends, we still don't actually get Cable's full origin. So the big reveal Marvel advertised simply doesn't happen. Instead of delivering answers, the story swerves into a convoluted clone conflict. Strife is revealed to be Cable's clone, created as part of a time travel experiment, raised in misery, and fueled by revenge. This explanation alone confused a lot of readers, but it also made everything feel smaller. What started as a massive, destiny-shaking mystery turned into yet another 90s secret clone twist, a trope that was already wearing thin across Marvel. Worse, the crossover structure didn't help, because the story jumped between so many titles, the pacing felt broken. One issue would be pure action, the next would stall for dialogue, then suddenly, the story would jump to a different team entirely. If you weren't buying every single issue across all series, the narrative became fragmented and frustrating fast. It felt less like one epic story and more like several half-stories stitched together. By the end, Professor X survives, Strife is defeated, Cable is cleared of blame, and fans looked around asking, that's it? The story that was hyped as a defining moment in X-Men history ended up feeling like a massive bait and switch. The actual truth about Cable wouldn't be revealed until an entirely different story 2 years later, which made Executioner's Song feel pointless in hindsight. The Infinity War. It is a direct sequel to the Infinity Gauntlet, but instead of focusing on Thanos as the main threat, the spotlight shifts to the Magus. This time the war isn't about erasing half the universe, it's about total domination through deception, doppelgangers, and cosmic mind games. And once again, every hero in the Marvel universe is forced to join the fray. The story kicks off when Adam Warlock, having claimed the Infinity Gauntlet and ascended to near omnipotence, tries to purge all good and evil from his soul to become a being of pure logic. The good side becomes the goddess, explored in Infinity Crusade later, later, while the evil half becomes the Magus, a powerful and sadistic villain with a god complex. And the Magus' goal? Conquer the universe using an army of evil doppelgangers of every major Marvel hero, created using cosmic tech and dark energy. Suddenly, Spider-Man is fighting an evil Spider-Man, and Wolverine is slashing at his clone, etc. Meanwhile, Thanos, now an unlikely anti-hero, discovers that something's wrong in the cosmos and investigates the rise of the Magus. And despite his past sins, Thanos ends up helping the heroes, not out of kindness, but because Magus, gaining ultimate power, would threaten existence itself. And the situation becomes even more chaotic when the Magus seeks out cosmic containment units, alternate versions of the Infinity Gauntlet's power source, to increase his dominance. And the final confrontation involves cosmic chess moves between Thanos, Warlock, and Magus, with abstract entities like Eternity and the Living Tribunal looking on. In the end, it's not brute force that ends the conflict. Warlock, with help from Thanos, tricks the Magus into trying to ascend to power using an incomplete artifact, leaving him vulnerable and defeated. Once again, balance is restored, but the trust between the heroes, especially toward Warlock, is shaken. Infinity War isn't as flashy as Infinity Gauntlet, but it's a darker, more cerebral story. It's about duality, good versus evil, not just in the universe, but within each soul. And while it didn't involve a finger snap or a cosmic genocide, it's still one of the most legendary wars in comics. Maximum Carnage. It is one of the most iconic and violent Spider-Man crossover events of the 1990s, published in 1993 and spanning 14 issues across multiple Spider-Man titles like Amazing Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, and Spider-Man Unlimited. The storyline brings together Spider-Man's most dangerous villain, Carnage, and his sadistic new family of killers, plunging New York into a nightmarish killing spree. The chaos begins when Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, escapes from Ravencroft Asylum, bringing his alien symbiote back with him. But he doesn't just want to escape. He wants to destroy everything. Carnage assembles a murderous team to unleash carnage literally across Manhattan. There's Shriek, a sound manipulation psychopath who becomes Carnage's deranged lover. Her powers amplify the city's violence, turning civilians into mobs of madness. There's Doppelganger, a monstrous six-armed clone of Spider-Man, Carrion, a decaying Death Touch villain, and Demogoblin, a demonic hell-obsessed goblin. Together they become a cult-like family of chaos, spreading fear, death, and riots throughout New York City. Realizing the threat is far too much for him alone, Spider-Man gathers allies, some traditional, others more extreme. There's Venom, Captain America, Iron Fist and Cloak and Dagger, Black Cat, Morbius, Nightwatch, Deathlock, and Firestar, who form a loose and easy alliance to combat the growing tide of destruction. But as the city descends into madness, conflicts within the group erupt. Some, like Venom and Morbius, want to kill Carnage outright, while Spider-Man desperately clings to his no-kill rule, refusing to stoop to Carnage's level. As Carnage's group murders indiscriminately, Spider-Man is pushed to his breaking point. Eventually, the heroes discover a way to counteract Shriek's psychic influence over the public using a goodness amplifier device, powered by Dagger's light and Firestar's energy. In the final battle, Spider-Man confronts Carnage alone, refusing to kill him, even when given the chance. With help from Venom and Captain America, Carnage is subdued and taken back into custody, but not without scars. The city is shaken, the body count is high, and Spider-Man is left to wonder whether his mercy was bravery or naivety. And this event was hugely popular, spawning video games, toys, including a Maximum Carnage beat-em-up video game for Sega Genesis, and this event is still to this day one of the most brutal Spider-Man events ever, and it solidified Carnage as one of Spidey's most terrifying villains. It introduced the concept of Carnage's family, later expanded in Absolute Carnage and King in Black, and showed Spider-Man in a new light, emotionally worn, morally conflicted, but still unwilling to cross the line. The Clone Saga. It actually began with a really interesting concept. What if Peter Parker wasn't the original Spider-Man, and the clone was the real one all along? That idea alone was enough to hook readers. It brought back Ben Reilly, introduced the Scarlet Spider, and created a sense of mystery around Peter's identity. At first, it felt fresh and bold, like Marvel was taking a real risk with one of its biggest characters. The biggest problem is that it went on way too long. What was supposed to be a shorter storyline got stretched across multiple issues, titles, and even years. Every time it felt like the story was about to wrap up, another twist would get added. New clones, new villains, new reveals. It just kept going. Instead of building excitement, it made readers feel exhausted. It became less of a story and more of a never-ending loop. The Clone Saga became infamous for its constant twists. One minute Peter is the real one, then he's not, then maybe he is again. Characters like Kane, Ben Reilly, and multiple versions of villains made everything even more confusing. It reached the point where readers genuinely didn't know what was canon anymore. anymore. And when a story becomes that hard to follow, people stop caring about the outcome. One of the boldest and most controversial moves was trying to replace Peter Parker with Ben as the real Spider-Man. Peter was even set up to retire and live a normal life. On paper, it sounds like an interesting evolution, but for many fans, it just didn't feel right. Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Changing that core identity, especially in such a messy storyline, made a lot of readers push back hard. The Clone Saga is now remembered less for its good ideas and more of how badly it was handled. It had potential, but the endless extensions, confusing twists, and constant retcons turned it into a frustrating experience. Instead of being a bold reinvention, it became a cautionary example of what happens when a story loses direction. Even today, it's still one of the first things people mention when talking about Marvel's most controversial comic runs. Marvels. It flips the usual superhero story on its head by making the main character just a regular guy. Phil Sheldon is a photographer and reporter, not a hero, not a genius, not anything special in a world full of gods and monsters. And that's exactly why the story works so well. Instead of following the people with powers, you experience everything through someone trying to understand what's happening around him. Through Sheldon's career, you basically walk through the entire history of Marvel. He's there when the original Human Torch appears, when Captain America becomes a symbol during World War II, when the Avengers form, and when mutants start being feared and hated. But instead of these moments feeling like epic highlights, they feel personal, confusing, and sometimes even scary. You're not watching legends, you're watching events unfold like a normal person would. And what really makes this story stand out is how it handles perspective. Heroes aren't always seen as heroes from the outside. Sometimes they are inspiring, sometimes they are terrifying, and sometimes people just don't know what to think. The X-Men stuff especially hits hard because you see how fear and prejudice built from the ground level. It's not just a big message, it feels real because you're seeing it through someone living in that world. There's also a strong emotional core with Sheldon himself. As he grows older, you see how these events shape his life, his beliefs, and even his relationships. He's constantly trying to make sense of a world that keeps getting bigger and stranger. And over time, there's this mix of awe, fear, and even doubt about whether all of this is actually a good thing for humanity. As a movie or series, this would be such a different kind of Marvel project. It wouldn't rely on non-stop action, it would focus more on reactions and storytelling from the ground level. Think of it like experiencing the Marvel Universe the way we would if it were real. And that perspective alone could make it one of the most unique and meaningful adaptations Marvel could ever do. Marvel Ruins came out in 1995 and is written by Warren Ellis. It is a grim dystopian counterpart to the famous Marvel series by Kurt Busiek. Where Marvel celebrates the wonder and awe of the Marvel Universe, Ruins show what that world would look like if everything went wrong. It is set in a reality where superpowers are more cursed than gifts, and the series reimagines familiar heroes not as icons but as mutated victims, government experiments, or grotesque casualties of failed science. The story is told through the eyes of Phil Sheldon, a reporter investigating the rise and fall of superhuman activity in this alternate universe. But instead of inspiration, he finds death, decay, and suffering. The Avengers are dead or imprisoned. Captain America is a paranoid, disfigured fugitive. The Fantastic Four's spaceflight didn't result in powers, it ended in body horror. Jean Grey is a prostitute, and Wolverine is rotting from the inside out due to metal poisoning. Galactus is dead in space. There are no heroic battles or epic team-ups here, just tragedy and grotesque irony. The X-Men are not a group of idealists, but deformed outcasts and casualties of mutation. Peter Parker never became Spider-Man. He was killed when the radioactive spider bite caused a massive skin infection and necrosis. And instead of becoming saviors, those who try to reach beyond humanity are punished by the very forces that gave them powers in the main universe. And the Art of Ruins is photorealistic, amplifying the horror and decay at every turn. Its tone is nihilistic, almost cruel in its deconstruction of beloved characters, but that's also the point. Ruins is a satirical inversion, a cynical mirror held up to the optimism of superhero mythology. It suggests that in the real world, accidents involving radiation, cosmic rays, or gene mutation wouldn't create heroes. They would create monsters, corpses, and failed experiments. And in the end, Marvel Ruins stands as one of the darkest what-if style stories Marvel has ever published. The Punisher. Frank Castle's tragic origin always circles back to the loss of his family, but in this one shot, Marvel cranks that pain up to 11. Instead of mobsters gunning them down in Central Park, his wife and kids are killed during a huge battle between superheroes and villains. Spider-Man, the Avengers, and the X-Men are all involved, and the collateral damage wipes out the castles. For Frank, that's the final straw. He decides that every single person with powers, no matter if they are hero or villain, is responsible. Once Frank sets his mind on something, there's no turning back. Using his military training and a cold tactical mindset, he goes on a calculated crusade. What makes it fascinating is that he doesn't just rely on brute force. He uses strategy. For example, he manipulates situations so heroes take each other out, exploits weaknesses they never expect a normal human to know, and arms himself with tech from the very villains he hunts. So it's about outthinking the gods of the Marvel universe. The Punisher blew up all of the other X-Men and most of the major X-Men villains in a giant nuclear explosion on the moon. He then attacked Wolverine whilst he was drunk from drowning his sorrows after losing most of his friends, and during their fight, he stabbed Wolverine in the throat with a knife and in the chest with Wolverine's own claws and threw him into an electric generator. Wolverine's claws pierced the generator and Wolverine was electrocuted until he basically melted down to just his skeleton. That's how graphic the story is. And even Doctor Doom, Captain America, Kingpin, Spider-Man, someone Frank once admired, none of them escape his wrath. These deaths aren't flashy cosmic battles. They are cruel, personal, and grounded in Frank's style of vengeance. And that's what makes the story so unsettling. You are watching these larger-than-life icons fall to a single man with no powers except relentless will. And as the body counts grow, Frank doesn't slow down. He doesn't spare anyone. Heroes, villains, mutants, cosmic defenders, they all go down. It's not about justice anymore. It is pure rage, wrapped in the cold logic that if they didn't exist, his family would still be alive. The scary part is how easily he justifies it, turning grief into a full-blown war on superhumanity. So after killing pretty much everyone, Frank comes face to face with Daredevil, who tries one last time to reach him. But Frank doesn't want redemption. Instead, he kills Matt too, realizing that his crusade has left nothing behind. No family, no friends, and no humanity. With the mission complete and no reason left to keep breathing, he finally turns the gun on himself. Yes, Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe isn't canon, but it's definitely unforgettable. It strips away the fun and spectacle of superhero comics. No jokes, just one man against everyone. And somehow, he wins in a way. Rob Liefeld's Captain America. This one came out during the Heroes Reborn era, when Marvel basically rebooted some of its biggest characters in a new universe. On paper, it sounded exciting. Fresh start, new direction, big creative names, but the moment people saw Liefeld's version of Cap, yeah, things went downhill fast. The most iconic and most mocked part of this run is Captain America's design. Rob gave him an absolutely massive chest, like unreasonably huge. It became a meme before memes were even a thing. The proportions were so off that it distracted from everything else in the comic. Instead of focusing on the story, readers were stuck thinking, why does he look like that? It's honestly one of the most infamous art choices in comic book history. Beyond the visuals, the storytelling itself didn't help much. The run leaned heavily into flashy action and big moments, but lacked depth. Captain America is supposed to represent ideals, leadership, morality, responsibility, but those themes didn't really come through here. Instead, it felt more like a generic action comic wearing a Captain America costume. The heart of the character just wasn't there. Rob's style works for certain characters, high energy, edgy, exaggerated heroes, but Captain America isn't one of them. Cap is usually portrayed with a grounded, heroic presence. Putting him into a hyper-stylized, extreme 90s aesthetic made him feel out of place. It's like forcing a character into a tone that doesn't match who they are, and the result just feels off the entire time. Over time, this Captain America became less of a serious run and more of a legendary example of what not to do. The art overshadowed everything, the story didn't leave an impact, and fans never really accepted this version of the character. Nowadays, it's remembered mostly for that ridiculous design and as a symbol of the excesses of 90s comics. It's not just disliked, it's iconic for all the wrong reasons. Angel Punisher. At one point, Marvel decided to take Frank Castle, one of the most grounded, brutal street-level characters, and turn him into something completely unexpected, a literal supernatural agent. After dying, Frank is resurrected by heaven and comes back as an angelic warrior, working for higher powers instead of just waging the personal war crime. And that felt completely disconnected from what makes the Punisher the Punisher. The core of Frank Castle is simple. He's human, broken, and operating in a very real, gritty world. No powers, no cosmic rules, just raw vengeance. Turning him into an angel took away that grounded element and replaced it with something way more abstract. Suddenly, instead of street-level justice, you've got divine missions and supernatural enemies. For a character built on realism, that shift just didn't click with a lot of readers. Punisher stories are usually dark, violent, and serious, but this run leaned into a weird mix of religious symbolism, supernatural lore, and over-the-top concepts. It created a clash where nothing really felt consistent. One moment, it's trying to be deep and symbolic, the next, it feels almost and intentionally ridiculous, and that mismatch made it hard for fans to stay invested. To be fair, the concept itself isn't terrible. A resurrected anti-hero working as a divine enforcer could actually work in the right context. The problem is that Frank Castle just isn't that character. It felt like a story that belonged to someone else but was forced onto the Punisher name, so they just rewrote him and ignored his core identity. So this version of the Punisher is remembered as one of those what were they thinking moments in Marvel history. Fans didn't just dislike the story, they rejected the entire direction. When you take a character known for being brutally human and turn him into a supernatural agent of heaven, you risk losing everything people liked about him in the first place. Earth X. It is one of those stories that feels massive in scope, but also really unsettling the more you think about it. It's set in an alternate future where the entire world has changed in a way no one expected. Thanks to the Terrigen Mist being released by Black Bolt, pretty much everyone on Earth has developed some kind of power. Sounds good at first, until you realize when everyone is super, things don't magically get better. They get way more chaotic. The world itself feels broken. Captain America is no longer the symbol he once was, after crossing a line he can't come back from. Meanwhile, Norman Osborn is running the United States, which already tells you how messed up things have become. On top of that, there's this creepy kid called Skull, controlling people and building an army, adding even more tension to a world that's already falling apart. What really pushes the story into something special is the cosmic side. Loki discovers that Earth itself isn't just a planet, it's basically an egg meant to birth a celestial, and that idea alone changes everything. Suddenly the stakes aren't just about saving society or fixing politics, it's about the survival of the entire planet, and the wild part is that Loki, of all characters, ends up playing a key role in trying to stop what's coming. This is way darker than your usual Marvel story. It's not just about action, but about consequences, legacy, and what happens when decades of superhero history lead to a future that doesn't feel heroic anymore. You see how things evolved over time, and not always in a good way. There's this constant feeling that the world has moved past its peak and is now dealing with the fallout. Earth X could be something huge and completely different in the MCU. It had that mix of grounded political tension and big cosmic ideas, which is a rare combo. You could go the route of making it a standalone dark future story, or connect it to the multiverse and have a modern hero experience this world. Either way, it's the kind of story that shows what Marvel looks like when everything goes just a little too far. Supreme Power is Marvel taking a very familiar superhero concept and pushing it into a much darker direction. Written by G. Michael Straczynski, the story starts with a spaceship crash landing on Earth, carrying an alien baby who would later become Hyperion. But instead of being raised by a normal family, the US government takes him in and turns him into something else entirely, a controlled asset, trained and shaped to serve their interests. As Hyperion grows up, he's basically molded into the perfect hero, but everything about him feels off. His life is monitored, his actions are calculated, and his identity is built around being a weapon first and a person second. When the government finally reveals him to the world, it creates this ripple effect where other superhumans start emerging too. That's how the Squadron Supreme forms, not as a natural team, but as a result of manipulation, fear, and power structures. The story really shines in how it explores control and corruption. These aren't clean-cut heroes doing the right thing, they are people shaped by experiments, politics, and pressure. Some of them struggle with their roles, others lean into it, and that tension keeps everything grounded. You're constantly questioning whether they are actually protecting the world or just enforcing the will of those in charge. Yeah, it is much more serious and mature than typical team-up stories. There's violence, but also a lot of focus on psychology and consequences. It feels closer to something like The Boys than a traditional Marvel team-up story. Powers exist, but they come with heavy baggage, and the world reacts to them in a way that feels more realistic and uneasy. As an R-rated adaptation, Supreme Power could be a really interesting move for Marvel. It offers a chance to tell a superhero story that questions the system behind the heroes instead of just celebrating them. And even if they don't go fully dark, introducing the Squadron Supreme in any form could open the door to bigger, more complex stories down the line. Punisher Max. When Punisher Max kicks off, you're immediately thrown into a version of the Marvel world that feels way more grounded. Written by Garth Ennis, this run strips away the superhero fluff and focuses entirely on Frank Castle as a war veteran who never really left the battlefield. He's older here, more tired, but also way more dangerous. The story treats crime seriously. There's no costumes, no over-the-top gimmicks, just real-world brutality and consequences that hit hard. The tone is what really makes the series stand out. It's very raw and violent and doesn't hold back at all. You're dealing with organized crime, human trafficking, corrupt systems, and some genuinely disturbing villains. Every fight feels messy and painful, not like a cool action scene, but more like something you almost don't want to watch. And that's exactly why it works so well. It makes you feel the weight of everything Frank does, instead of just cheering him on mindlessly. The story also spends much time exploring Frank's mindset. You get flashbacks to his time in Vietnam, showing how war shaped him into the person he is. It's about a man who only knows one way to exist. There's a constant feeling that even if crime disappeared overnight, Frank wouldn't know how to stop. That psychological angle adds a lot more depth than people usually expect from Punisher stories. And the villains in Max are also on another level. Characters like Bracuda, they aren't just obstacles, they are terrifying in their own right. They match Frank's brutality and sometimes even push beyond it, which creates this intense back and forth where you're not even sure who's worse. It keeps the tension high because every encounter feels unpredictable and personal, not just another mission. If you are thinking about an R-rated Marvel movie, this is basically the blueprint. Punisher Max already feels like something made for that kind of adaptation. It's grounded, it's mature, and unapologetically harsh. But it's not just violence for the sake of it. There's a real story here about trauma, morality, and what happens when someone dedicates their entire life to war. Done right, it could easily be one of the most intense and memorable Marvel adaptations out there. Marvel 1602. The comics drop you into a version of the Marvel Universe that feels completely different right from the start. Written by Neil Gaiman, the story takes all the heroes you know and places them in the year 1602, during the Elizabethan era. So instead of modern-day Avengers and X-Men, you've got characters like Stephen Strange as a royal physician, and Nick Fury as a spy master working for the crown. It's instantly interesting, because everything is familiar, but also completely reimagined in a grounded historical setting. The plot slowly builds into something much bigger than it first seems. It starts with political tension, with Queen Elizabeth I's court, rising threats, secret alliances, but then things get weird in the best way. There's this looming sense that the world itself is breaking, like reality isn't supposed to look like this. You've got strange storms, unnatural events, and a mystery tied to a character named Rohaz, who might be the key to why everything feels off. So it's less about big action and more about unraveling what's really going on. One of the strongest parts of the story is how it handles the witch breed, which are basically this world's version of mutants. Instead of being feared in a modern society, they are hunted during a time that already feared anything different. It adds a layer of realism because this isn't just superhero conflict, it's tied to real historical paranoia. Visually and tonally, this would be such a unique R-rated project. Think less colorful superhero movie and more dark fantasy drama. You could lean into the political intrigue, the religious tension, and the slow mystery of a collapse in reality. It's honestly closer to something like Game of Thrones than a typical Marvel story, and that mix of grounded history with hidden powers and secrets could make it stand out a lot. If Marvel ever wanted to explore the multiverse in a deeper way, Marvel 1602 is perfect for that. It's not just a what-if scenario. It feels like a fully realized world with its own rules, culture, and stakes. And instead of rushing through it in a movie, this is something that would work way better as a full series, given time to explore all the characters and the mystery behind why this universe even exists in the first place. Chuck Austin's Uncanny X-Men. When Chuck Austin took over Uncanny X-Men in the early 2000s, fans could tell pretty quickly that something was different, and not in a good way. The tone of the book felt inconsistent, jumping between serious X-Men drama and weird, almost soap opera storytelling. Characters didn't sound like themselves, and their decisions often felt random or forced just to move the plot forward. For a team like the X-Men, where fans are deeply attached to personalities and relationships, that kind of shift stood out immediately and made the run hard to take seriously. One of the biggest complaints about this run is how badly it handled established characters. Angel, Havoc, Nightcrawler, a lot of them just didn't feel like the versions fans knew. Relationships became messy in ways that didn't feel natural, and emotional moments often came off as awkward instead of impactful. It wasn't just that the characters changed, it's that they changed without believable development, and that disconnect made it feel like you were reading alternate versions of the X-Men rather than the real team. If there's one moment people always bring up, it's the infamous Angel and Husk scene. In one issue, the two characters have a very public, very awkward romantic moment, literally in the sky, in front of Husk's own mother. It's the kind of scene that feels more shocking than meaningful, and it became a perfect example of what people didn't like about the run, trying to create drama through uncomfortable or bizarre situations instead of strong storytelling. Moments like this didn't deepen the characters, they just made readers confused. Then there's the Draco, probably the most controversial part of the entire run. This storyline introduced Azazel and revealed that Nightcrawler's origin wasn't what fans believed. It turned into a whole demon-related retcon involving teleporting mutants and strange lore. The problem wasn't just the twist itself, but how it was handled. It felt overly complicated, unnecessary, and disconnected from what made Nightcrawler special in the first place. Instead of adding depth, it felt like it rewrote his identity for no real reason. At the end of the day, Chuck Austen's Uncanny X-Men is remembered as one of the lowest points in X-Men history because it missed what makes the X-Men work. The team is built on strong character writing, meaningful relationships, and themes about identity and struggle. This run replaced a lot of that with strange plots, awkward drama, and inconsistent characterization. It's not just that it had bad moments, it's that it never really found its footing. And that's why, even years later, fans still bring it up as one of Marvel's most disliked comic runs. Kevin Smith's Spider-Man, Black Cat, The Evil That Man Do is one of the most infamous and uncomfortable Marvel projects ever published. And not because it's edgy or violent, but because it dives into subject matter that feels completely wrong for the characters, the tone, and the world it's set in. Fans expected a fun, flirtatious Spider-Man and Black Cat adventure with Jerry Dodson's slick art. Instead, Smith delivered a story about heroin dealers, sexual assault, childhood trauma, and rape revelations, wrapped in the tone of a book that clearly wasn't meant to handle those topics with the weight they deserved. The comic starts with Spider-Man teaming up with Black Cat to stop a drug trafficker named Garrison Klum. But things take a sharp turn when it's implied that Klum sexually assaulted Felicia Hardy in the past. The story doesn't explore this with nuance or care, it drops the revelation like a shock twist. Then the narrative goes even further, that introduces Garrison's younger brother Francis, who reveals that he was molested by Garrison as a child, a trauma that later pushes him into becoming the new Mysterio. So now in a Spider-Man book that was marketed as a stylish Black Cat spotlight, the villains and the heroes are all suddenly part of a tangled mess of assault, trauma, and exploitation. The most controversial moment comes when Felicia tells Francis that she is a multiple rape survivor, and that her traumatic past is what originally pushed her to become Black Cat. This retcon enraged fans because it introduced a confident, flirtatious, self-driven character into someone whose entire origin was rewritten through sexual violence. It felt cheap, exploitive, and unnecessary, especially because the comic doesn't use that revelation to develop her character, empower her, or explore healing. To make matters worse, the male survivor of abuse becomes a goofy supervillain by the end, which comes off as unintentionally cruel and tone deaf. Trauma here is used more as a plot twist than a meaningful part of the story. By the end, The Evil That Man Do feels like a story that didn't understand its own tone. It tried to be serious and edgy, but it didn't give the characters, the audience, or the subject matter the respect they deserved. Chuck Austen's Avengers. This run isn't just hated, it's barely talked about, and that says a lot. Compared to his infamous X-Men run, this one kind of slipped under the radar, but not because it was good, it's because fans just didn't connect with it at all. Even at the time, Austen already had a bad reputation, and that backlash followed him straight into the Avengers. People were already skeptical going in, and the run did absolutely nothing to win them over. One of the biggest problems was the focus on awkward, unnecessary drama. Instead of big teams dynamics, leadership conflicts, or classic Avengers level threats, the run leaned into weird relationship plots. For example, there were storylines involving affairs and love triangles within the team, which again, just like his Uncanny X-Men's run, felt more like forced soap opera drama than superhero storytelling. And it's not that relationships are bad, but here, it felt like that was the main focus, instead of the actual Avengers doing what they are supposed to do. Austen's writing style is one of the main reasons his runs get criticized, and Avengers is no exception. A lot of readers pointed out that dialogue felt unnatural and sometimes just bad. Characters didn't sound like themselves, and interactions came off awkward instead of meaningful. Some critics even argued that his writing, especially for female characters, was shallow or poorly handled, which made team dynamics even worse. Another issue is that nothing in this run really sticks. No iconic moments, no major arcs people look back on, no defining Avengers storyline. Even when Austen introduced new ideas, like a new version of Captain Britain, Lionheart, they didn't leave a lasting impression. Compared to the other Avengers run that reshaped the team or define its role, this one just kind of exists. And for a team as big as the Avengers, being forgettable is almost worse than being controversial. So Chuck Austen's Avengers suffers from the same issues as his other work. Poor characterization, awkward drama, and a lack of clear direction. It didn't feel like a strong Avengers story, it felt like a disconnected set of ideas that never fully came together. And because fans already had issues with Austen's writing, this run just reinforced that reputation. Secret War. This one is kind of small in scale, but it's just as important as other wars. Nick Fury finds out that Lucia von Bardas, the Prime Minister of Latveria, is secretly funding and upgrading supervillains with stolen Doctor Doom technology. Fury takes this straight to the president, expecting a green light to shut it down immediately. Instead, he gets stonewalled. No authorization, no intervention, and no permission to act. And that's the moment Fury realizes the system he protects is too slow, too political, and too scared to stop what's coming. Rather than accept that answer, Fury quietly assembles his own strike team. Captain America, Wolverine, Spider-Man, Luke Cage, Daredevil, and a few others. No Avengers label, no official mission, just a dirty Black Ops job in Latveria to burn von Bardas' operation to the ground before anyone knows it ever existed. The heroes think they are stopping a disaster, and they do. The villain network collapses, the tech is destroyed, and the future attack never happens, or so they believe. Here's the twist that turns Secret War from a spy thriller into a moral horror story. After the mission is done, Fury erases the heroes' memories of the entire operation. No consent and no warning. The heroes go back to their lives with a blank year in their heads, never knowing they crossed international borders, assaulted a sovereign nation, and destabilized a government. Fury keeps the truth to himself, building his career on a war nobody remembers fighting. A year later, von Bardas makes sure the world remembers. Using Doom's leftover tech, she launches a devastating attack on New York City. Buildings collapse, supervillains rampage through the streets, and innocent people are caught in the crossfire. And the message is clear. Fury thought he erased the problem, but all he did was delay it. As the heroes piece together what really happened, the truth hits harder than any superweapon. Fury manipulated them. Their anger isn't about Latveria anymore. It's about the betrayal. These are people who trust each other with their lives, and Fury violated their minds to protect his secrets. Every friendship, every alliance suddenly feels fragile. Because if Fury could do this once, what else has he hidden? And by the end of Secret War, Fury is forced to leave S.H.I.E.L.D., Maria Hill steps in, and the entire power structure of Marvel's hero community shifts. Avengers Disassembled. Written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by David Finch, this event is a pivotal storyline that marked the end of an era for Earth's mightiest heroes. This fourth-part event dismantled the core Avengers team through tragedy, betrayal, and destruction, setting the stage for a new era in Marvel's storytelling. The story begins with a sudden and brutal assault on the Avengers mansion. The team faces an unprecedented series of attacks, seemingly coming out of nowhere as their world crumbles around them. What makes the situation more harrowing is that the threat originates from one of their own, Scarlet Witch. Wanda's grief over the loss of her children, compounded by years of trauma and the manipulation of her reality-altering powers, drives her to lash out against her teammates. And unaware of her actions, she becomes the catalyst for the Avengers' greatest crisis. The chaos begins when the reanimated corpse of Jack of Hearts, a former Avenger, detonates at the mansion, killing Scott Lang. Moments later, a Quinjet crashes into the mansion, piloted by an enraged Vision who releases a swarm of Ultron drones to attack the Avengers. These events leave the team reeling and confused, and during a battle against the alien Kree, Hawkeye heroically sacrificed himself to save his teammates, dying in a blaze of glory. His death is a devastating blow to the team and adds to the growing sense of despair. Doctor Strange arrives to reveal that the chaos is being caused by Wanda Maximoff. Her suppressed memories of her children's erasure have resurfaced, triggering a mental breakdown. The Avengers confront Wanda, but the damage has already been done. Their trust is shattered, their ranks decimated, and their once unbreakable bond fractured. The team disbands, recognizing that they can no longer function as Earth's mightiest heroes in the wake of such destruction. The story concludes with the Avengers reflecting on their legacy and the losses they've endured. The final issue, Avengers Finale, serves as a bittersweet goodbye to the classic team, paving the way for a new chapter in Marvel history. Wanda's actions here set the stage for House of M, and the disbanding of the team led to the formation of a new Avengers lineup in New Avengers, which introduced characters like Spider-Man and Wolverine to the roster. The event marked the beginning of Brian Michael Bendis' influence on Marvel's flagship titles, ushering in a modern, character-driven approach to storytelling. The Slavers. It is easily one of the darkest stories Marvel has ever published because it barely feels like a superhero comic at all. Written by Garth Ennis. During his legendary Punisher Max run, this story follows the Punisher uncovering a human trafficking and forced prostitution ring operation in New York. And instead of treating the situation like just another crime for Frank Castle to punish, the comic spends a lot of time focusing on the victims, the criminals, corrupt systems, and the people caught in the middle. The horrors in the story feel horrifyingly real, compared to most Marvel villains villains or cosmic disasters. And it shows how almost everyone around the situation becomes complicit in some way, whether through fear, greed, corruption, or simply looking away. Even characters trying to help often fail horribly. One of the most tragic examples is a social worker who attempts to save one of the victims but accidentally causes events that led to the death of the woman's baby. That guilt completely breaks her emotionally and pushes her toward working with the Punisher despite hating everything he stands for. The villains themselves are also deeply disturbing. They are cruel, realistic people running a horrific business while treating human lives like products. The comic does not hold back when showing the brutality and depravity of the trafficking ring, which makes the atmosphere feel incredibly heavy the entire time. By the time Frank finally starts taking the organization apart, the violence almost feels inevitable rather than heroic. And unlike a lot of Punisher stories where the action feels cool or over the top, here it feels ugly, angry, and deeply personal. The ending is satisfying because the villains are monsters, but the story still leaves you thinking about all the damage that was already done long before the Punisher arrived. House of M. It's one of Marvel's most iconic and emotionally driven crossover events, written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Olivier Coipel. It's an 8-issue series that centers on Scarlet Witch and her breakdown that lead to the creation of alternate reality where mutants dominate and humans are marginalized. The story begins after Wanda's mental state deteriorates, following the loss of her children and her catastrophic actions in Avengers The Assembled. Her immense reality-altering powers make her a danger to everyone, prompting the Avengers and the X-Men to discuss whether Wanda should be killed for the greater good. And this leads to a confrontation where Wanda, in desperation, alters reality itself. In the New World, Wanda creates mutants, our dominant species, and Magneto rules as a benevolent leader in a mutant utopia. Every character's deepest desires are fulfilled. For example, Spider-Man is happily married with a family, Wolverine regains his full memories, and mutants live without persecution. However, not everything is as perfect as it seems. Wolverine, who retains his memories in this altered reality, realizes something is wrong. He sets out to uncover the truth and restore the world to its original state, gathering a resistance of heroes and mutants who begin to remember their true lives. Layla Miller, a young mutant with the power to awaken memories, becomes a crucial ally. She helps the Resistance, comprising Wolverine, Emma Frost, Luke Cage, and others, remember the real world, sparking a rebellion against Magneto's regime. And as the Resistance confronts Magneto, it's revealed that Wanda created this world not for herself, but to give others what they desired most. Her father Magneto had unknowingly influenced her decisions, as she sought to fulfill his dream of mutant dominance. The climax occurs when Wanda, enraged by Magneto's manipulation and the chaos her actions have caused, utters the infamous words, "No more mutants." This single phrase rewrites reality again, depowering 98% of the mutant population worldwide and ending the age of mutant dominance. House of M had a profound impact on the Marvel Universe. The mutant decimation became a central storyline in the years following the event, influencing arcs like Decimation, Messiah Complex, and Avengers vs. X-Men. It also deepened the complexity of Scarlet Witch's character, establishing her as one of Marvel's most tragic and unpredictable figures. This event is a masterpiece of emotional storytelling and world-building. It skillfully blends personal tragedy with universe-altering stakes, creating a story that is as thought-provoking as it is impactful. Annihilation. This crossover event takes place outside Earth's usual conflicts and follows the Annihilation Wave, an all-consuming force led by Annihilus, the ruler of the Negative Zone. Written by Keith Giffen with art by Andrea DeVito and others, this event is a brutal, large-scale war epic that pits Marvel cosmic heroes against a seemingly unstoppable enemy, elevating characters like Nova, Silver Surfer, Drax, and Thanos to new levels of importance. So the Annihilation Wave commanded by Annihilus bursts out of the Negative Zone and begins annihilating entire galaxies, leaving billions dead. The wave cheers through the Nova Corps, obliterating Xandar and leaving only Nova as the last survivor. As Annihilus pushes forward, the cosmic balance of power is shattered, forcing various factions, including the Kree, Skrulls, and remnants of the Nova Corps, to either unite or be wiped out. The conflict escalates as Galactus, Thanos, and the Silver Surfer become entangled in the war, leading to one of the most intense battles in Marvel history. So, after the Annihilation Wave destroys Xandar, Nova absorbs the entire Nova Force, becoming Nova Prime, one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Then a group of survivors band together, including Nova, Drax seeking vengeance against Thanos, Silver Surfer reclaiming his power to combat Annihilus, Ronan the Accuser fighting for Kree survival, and Super Skrull. This coalition led by Nova becomes the universe's last hope against Annihilus. And Thanos initially aligns with Annihilus, seeing him as a necessary force of destruction. Annihilus captures Galactus and the Silver Surfer, intending to weaponize Galactus as a cosmic bomb, capable of destroying all life in the universe. Then Thanos betrays Annihilus after realizing his insanity, but is killed by Drax the Destroyer, fulfilling Drax's long-standing mission. With the war nearing its end, Nova and Annihilus engage in a brutal one-on-one fight, and despite Annihilus being physically superior, Nova uses his tactical mind and draw power to kill him, and the remaining Annihilation Wave forces are eradicated, but at an immense cost. The war is relentlessly violent, with no safe havens. Even powerful figures like Galactus and Thanos are outmatched. Annihilation reshaped Marvel's cosmic universe. It redefined Nova, Silver Surfer, and Drax, elevating them from background characters to A-list cosmic warriors. World War Hulk. There's only so much a man or a monster can take before he explodes, and World War Hulk is the explosive follow-up to Planet Hulk, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The Hulk returns to Earth, furious and vengeful, ready to wage war against the heroes who betrayed him. It's not just a revenge story, it's a brutal examination of what happens when the angriest being in the universe stops holding back. And for the Marvel Universe, it's one of the most destructive and personal conflicts ever seen. The road to war begins when the Illuminati decide that Hulk is too dangerous to remain on Earth. Without Bruce Banner's consent, they launch him into space, intending for him to live peacefully on an inhabited planet. Instead, Hulk crash lands on Sakaar, a violent world where he's enslaved, forced to fight as a gladiator, and ultimately rises to become a king. He finds peace, love, and purpose, only for it all to be destroyed when his ship explodes, killing his wife and unborn child. Hulk blames the Illuminati for this tragedy and returns to Earth as a strategic, focused warlord. Accompanied by his loyal, war-bound allies from Sakaar, he demands justice. Landing in New York, he gives humanity an ultimatum: deliver the heroes who wronged him, or face annihilation. And what follows is a devastating war across Manhattan, with Hulk defeating Earth's mightiest heroes, one by one, including Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and even Black Bolt, the Inhuman King. Hulk here doesn't kill indiscriminately. He wants the Illuminati to feel his pain. He stages public, gladiator-style trials, mirroring what he endured on Sakaar. But just when Hulk is about to lose control completely, it's revealed that the explosion that killed his people wasn't caused by the Illuminati. It was orchestrated by one of his own warbound, who wanted Hulk's rage to burn everything. And with the truth out, Hulk lets himself be taken down, but not before nearly breaking the planet. World War Hulk is a war that shows just how much raw power the Hulk has when he's pushed to his limit, but also how deep Bruce Banner's humanity still runs. The One More Day storyline. This right here is one of the most infamous Spider-Man stories ever told. It takes place after Civil War, when Peter Parker has publicly unmasked himself to the world. As a result, Aunt May gets shot by a sniper trying to take him out. She's on the brink of death, and Peter, desperate and guilt-ridden, goes to every hero and genius he can find for help. Nobody has a solution, so naturally, he turns to the literal devil of the Marvel Universe, Mephisto. So Mephisto offers Peter a bargain. He won't ask for Peter's soul or anything physical. He wants Peter and MJ's marriage. If they agree to erase their entire relationship from existence, he'll save Aunt May's life as if nothing happened. Peter and MJ are devastated, obviously, but ultimately agree. Mephisto rewrites history. Peter wakes up in a new reality where Aunt May is fine, but he and MJ were never married. It's like the last 20 years of their relationship were wiped clean. Readers had grown with Peter and MJ through decades of stories, and their marriage was one of the most mature and relatable relationships in superhero comics. Marvel editorial, especially Joe Quesada, believed a married Peter Parker was unrelatable, and that Spidey worked best as a struggling single guy. So they used a literal demon to undo years of development, not through death or divorce, but by rewriting reality. And the worst part, it wasn't just the marriage that got erased. One More Day created a ripple effect of confusion across Spider-Man continuity. Some stories now sort of happened, others were altered, and it was never entirely clear what was still canon. It also made Peter seem weak. Instead of facing grief or moving on like a grown adult, he traded away his love for a second chance, effectively saying Aunt May's life was more important than his own happiness and future. So to this day, One More Day is a sore spot for Spider-Man fans. Even when the marriage was briefly re-explored in Renew Your Vows or Spider-Verse, it was always in alternate timelines, and Marvel still hasn't fully undone the story. It's a retcon that tried to reset Spider-Man, but instead broke a part of him, and fans haven't stopped calling it one of Marvel's worst decisions ever since. Ultimates 3. When it launched in 2008, it had everything going for it. The first two Ultimates volumes had redefined Marvel for the 2000s, with grounded politics, brutal action, and cinematic storytelling. The Ultimate Universe was edgy, yes, but it was still smart. Then Jeff Loeb took over writing duties, and everything changed overnight. Instead of pushing the universe forward, Ultimates 3 drove it straight into controversy, shock for shock's sake, and some of the most baffling creative choices Marvel has ever approved. The book revolves around a murder murder mystery. Scarlet Witch is found dead, and the Ultimates scramble to find the killer. On the surface, this should have been a dark, emotional thriller, but that plot is quickly hijacked by the most infamous decision in the series: the explicit confirmation that Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are in a romantic and sexual relationship. Earlier Ultimate stories teased an unhealthy closeness as edgy subtext. Ultimate 3 removes all ambiguity. It flat out confirms it. No metaphor, no implication, just outright incest as canon. And then it somehow gets worse. Through flashbacks, the comic heavily implies that Wolverine might actually be the twins' biological father. The story never confirms it 100%, but it plants the idea intentionally. That means the comic is flirting with the possibility that Wolverine may have unknowingly fathered children who later entered a sexual relationship with each other. This single implication alone detonated fan trust in the series. It wasn't provocative in a meaningful way, it felt grotesque, unnecessary, and designed purely to shock readers into talking about the book. One of the most infamous scenes involves Captain America discovering what's going on between the twins. His reaction is exactly what you'd expect: confusion, discomfort, and disbelief. But instead of the story treating this revelation with the horror it deserved, Wasp awkwardly tries to rationalize it, minimizing the situation in a way that felt outrageously tone-deaf. This is the moment where readers mentally checked out. Meanwhile, the rest of the plot continues collapsing around this madness. The murder mystery leads to a ridiculous reveal involving Doctor Doom's brain controlling Ultron, culminating in a giant robot battle that feels completely disconnected from the emotional stakes the story pretended to set up. So in the end, the entire book becomes a swirling mess of fake deaths, fake twists, fake tension, all drowned under the weight of the incest storyline that nobody asked for. Fans were willing to accept darker takes on heroes, they were willing to accept moral grey areas. What they were not willing to accept was the writing. Ultimate 3 didn't push boundaries, it bulldozed them for attention. And from this point forward, the Ultimate line never fully recovered. Daniel Way's Deadpool. Instead of balancing humor with action and darker themes, Way leaned hard into the comedy. Deadpool became less of a dangerous anti-hero and more of a walking joke machine. The stories were built around randomness, absurd situations, and constant fourth wall breaks. For some readers that was fun, but for the rest, it felt like the character lost all sense of balance. Deadpool has always been funny, but there's a difference between clever humor and just being random for the sake of it. That's where this run lost people. The jokes often felt childish, over the top, and sometimes just awkward. Instead of sharp wit or dark humor, you'd get moments that felt more like shock value or internet-style randomness. And when every moment is trying to be funny, none of them really hit the way they should. So this run basically turned Deadpool into a caricature of himself. Deadpool is usually layered with trauma, skill, and unpredictability, but here he became almost entirely defined by jokes and chaos. The more serious sides of Deadpool, like the tragedy, the mental instability, the moments of clarity, were pushed aside. It made him feel less like a real character and more like a meme version of Deadpool. Before this run, Deadpool's stories usually balanced humor with darker elements, like violence, identity struggles, and emotional depth. That mix is what made him interesting. But here that balance was mostly gone. The focus on constant comedy made the stories feel lighter, but also less meaningful. For longtime fans, it felt like the character they liked was being simplified instead of explored. And to be fair, this run did help make Deadpool more popular and accessible. Some readers actually enjoyed the lighter, more chaotic tone, but at the same time, it created a version of Deadpool that stuck and not always in a good way. Many later adaptations leaned into that same style, which is why some fans still point to Daniel Way's run as the moment Deadpool became too much. It didn't ruin the character, but it definitely changed how people saw him, and not everyone liked that direction. Secret Invasion. If you ever wanted to see paranoia weaponized as a Marvel event, Secret Invasion is it. The whole thing kicks off with the shocking reveal that the Skrulls, Marvel's favorite shape-shifting aliens, have been secretly replacing heroes, politicians, and powerful figures on Earth for years. We're talking deep cover. Some Skrulls even had fake memories and powers to perfectly mimic their targets. Suddenly, every hero is asking the same question: who do we actually trust? And that sense of doubt spreads through the entire Marvel universe, setting the stage for one of the most suspenseful crossovers Marvel ever pulled off. Things got rolling when a Skrull ship crashes in the Savage Land, full of what look like classic Avengers in their 70s and 80s costumes. Are they the real deal? Are they Skrulls? Nobody knows, and it leads to a brutal fight between the real heroes and their retro counterparts. Meanwhile, in New York, Skrull's sleeper agents start activating, and you realize just how far the infiltration has gone, from S.H.I.E.L.D. to Hydra to Thunderbolts, and even religious groups and the media. Nick Fury plays a huge role here too. By the time of the invasion, he's gone underground, but he's been watching. Fury creates his own off-the-book strike team, the Secret Warriors, because he doesn't trust S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's right not to. Skrulls have infiltrated every level of global defense. And the brilliance of the event is how it takes years of Marvel continuity and turns them into clues. Some old character behavior from earlier comics suddenly makes sense because those characters were Skrulls the whole time. And when the Skrulls go public, it's full-on war. They unleash their army on Earth, bringing in Super Skrulls who have the combined power of multiple heroes. You get massive battles across New York City, Thunderbolts fighting side by side with heroes, and Norman Osborn of all people stepping up as a savior. The stakes feel massive, but the human element is still there. Spider-Woman's betrayal hits hard, and seeing beloved characters revealed as Skrulls makes the whole thing personal. The event ends with a massive showdown in Central Park, where pretty much every major hero and villain shows up to throw down. The final twist, it's Norman Osborn who delivers the killing blow to Queen Varanke, the Skrull leader, on live TV no less. Overnight, Osborn becomes a global hero, gets put in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D's replacement, Hammer, and ushers in the Dark Reign era where villains run the world. Secret Invasion is remembered not just for its action, but for how it made the Marvel Universe feel unsafe. Anyone could have been an imposter. Friendships were strained, teams were broken, and fans were left second-guessing years of stories. It wasn't about who could punch the hardest, it was about who you could believe in. Dark Reign is a unique crossover that explores a world where the villains have won, but instead of focusing on a singular event, Dark Reign is more of a thematic shift in Marvel's storytelling, spanning multiple series and highlighting the rise of Norman Osborn as one of the most powerful figures in the Marvel Universe. It's written by Brian Michael Bendis and features contributions from numerous writers and artists. The story picks up after the events of Secret Invasion, where Norman Osborn, the former Green Goblin, kills the Skrull Queen, earning him public acclaim as a hero who ended the alien invasion. Osborn uses this newfound popularity to disband S.H.I.E.L.D. and replace it with his own organization, Hammer, positioning himself as the de facto ruler of global security. Under Osborn's leadership, the world takes a dark turn as he consolidates power, manipulates public perception, and forms the Cabal, a secret group of powerful villains and anti-heroes who seek to shape the world to their liking. If you want to know more about the Cabal, watch my Marvel Supervillains video. The Cabal includes Loki, Doctor Doom, Namor, the Hood, and Emma Frost. The group is assembled to maintain control and advance their individual agendas. However, their alliances are fraught with tension as these villains constantly vie for dominance. Then Osborn forms his own versions of the Avengers, filled with rebranded villains masquerading as heroes. Bullseye becomes Hawkeye, McGargan as Venom becomes Spider-Man, Daken, Wolverine's son, becomes Wolverine, but the real Avengers, led by characters like Bucky Barnes as Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, go underground to resist Osborn's regime. They work covertly to expose his corruption and restore balance. One of Osborn's first targets is Tony Stark, whose databases contain sensitive information about heroes worldwide. Osborn hunts Stark relentlessly, leading to Tony erasing his own brain to protect this data. And Spider-Man becomes a key figure in resisting Osborn, as their personal rivalry deepens. Peter Parker works to expose Osborn's hypocrisy and prevent his schemes from going unchecked. And as Osborn's paranoia grows, cracks begin to form in his regime. His unstable Green Goblin persona resurfaces, threatening to unravel everything he's built. Dark Reign flips the traditional superhero dynamic by placing villains in charge, and the story directly leads into the Siege event, where Norman's reign comes to a dramatic and violent end. And unlike the other crossover events, this one is less about battles and more about the psychological and political dynamics of power. War of Kings. This cosmic war erupts in the aftermath of Secret Invasion and Annihilation, shifting focus from Earth's squabbles to a galactic-scale conflict. And at its core, War of Kings is a story about legacy. The war begins when the Inhumans, led by Black Bolt, take control of the Kree Empire after the fall of its previous leadership. At the same time, Vulcan, the long-lost Omega-level mutant brother of Cyclops, has become the tyrannical ruler of the Shi'ar Empire. Neither side is content with peace. Vulcan seeks expansion and domination, while Black Bolt and the Inhumans aim to protect their rule and elevate the Kree through Genesis. And the tension between these two empires escalates into an all-out war, dragging in various galactic factions, including the Nova Corps and the Starjammers. Though makes War of Kings especially intense is its tone. This isn't a war of ideals, it's a war of inheritance and revenge. Black Bolt, traditionally silent and composed, is pushed to his limit, and Vulcan, obsessed with power and validation, spirals into a madness that threatens the fabric of space-time. Battles take place on planetary scales, with super weapons, space fleets, elites and godlike beings clashing in increasingly destructive ways. Even the Guardians of the Galaxy struggle to keep the balance, realizing that this isn't a fight anyone can truly win. In the climax, Black Bolt and Vulcan confront each other in a one-on-one battle so powerful it causes a massive energy explosion, tearing open a rift in space known as the Fault. It's a tear in reality itself. Both leaders are seemingly killed, and while the war ends, the Fault becomes a looming cosmic threat, setting the stage for the Realm of Kings and the Thanos imperative events that follow. So the galaxy may have survived, but it's been permanently scarred. War of Kings isn't as mainstream as Infinity War or Secret Wars, but for fans of the cosmic side of Marvel, it's one of the most mature and impactful sagas ever told. It made Vulcan a top-tier villain and transformed the Inhumans from side characters into major players. The Necrosha War. It begins with Selene, the ancient immortal witch and former Black Queen of the Hellfire Club, deciding that ruling from the shadows isn't enough anymore. She wants to become a god. Her plan is simple: harvest enough mutant souls to ascend beyond mortality. To do that, she targets, of course, Genosha, the island where millions of mutants were slaughtered in one of Marvel's darkest genocides. Selene infects Genosha's mass grave with a techno-organic virus, turning the island into a resurrection engine. Millions of dead mutants, heroes, villains, civilians, forgotten background characters rise from the dirt. These aren't loved ones coming home. They return hollow-eyed, feral, and murderous. Genosha stops being a graveyard and becomes Necrosha, a nation of walking corpses. The undead, they flood toward Utopia, the mutant sanctuary built by Cyclops, overrunning defenses and slaughtering anything in their path. X-Men are forced to fight versions of friends they buried years ago. X-Force is pulled into Black Ops, extermination missions, hunting resurrected threats that were supposed to be gone forever. Every battlefield feels personal because the enemy wears familiar faces. Selene's ritual goes wrong when she accidentally resurrects Proteus, one of the most dangerous mutants to ever exist, a reality rapper whose very presence shreds physics. Now the war isn't just undead armies, it's reality collapsing around them. Time stutters, matter distorts, even the dead can't fully control what Proteus becomes, and suddenly the X-Men are fighting a resurrection event that can literally tear the universe apart. At the peak of the chaos, Selene completes her ritual on the ruins of Genosha, absorbing the life force of thousands and ascending into a dead goddess. From the throne of Necrosha, she commands the dead like an army of worshippers, feeding on their souls to sustain her power. But godhood doesn't make Selene untouchable. She is betrayed by her own followers and confronted by Warpath, who uses a mystical dagger she once gifted him to stab her through the heart, killing the woman who had outlived empires. Necrosha collapses, the dead finally return to the grave, and the war ends. Siege. It's a 2010 Marvel crossover event, serving as the climatic end to the Dark Reign era. Siege brings together years of storytelling involving Norman Osborn's rise to power, the fracturing of the Avengers, and the fall of Asgard itself. It's a fast-paced, brutal event that re-establishes the true Avengers, brings Thor back into the center of the Marvel universe, and ends with the redemption of several characters and the death of others. So after the events of Secret Invasion, Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, became the head of S.H.I.E.L.D's replacement, Hammer, and the de facto controller of superhero policy in America. With his own twisted team of Avengers, really just villains in disguise, and allies like Taskmaster, Bullseye, and the Sentry, Osborn built a fake image of peace and order, while suppressing dissent and hunting true heroes. But Asgard, recently returned to Earth and floating over Broxton, Oklahoma, stood outside his control, and that made it a threat. Osborn, manipulated by Loki, decides to use a manufactured incident as a pretext to declare war on Asgard. When Volstagg, one of the Warriors' Three, is framed for a disaster at Soldier Field, Osborn presents it as a terrorist attack and uses it to rally support for a full-scale invasion. And despite warnings from people like Reno Var, aka Captain Marvel, and Ares, Osborn gathers his Dark Avengers, launches an illegal assault on Asgard, and tells the world it's for national security. But this time the real heroes won't stand down. With the Dark Avengers, Hammer forces, and the insane Sentry now fully embracing his evil void side, Osborn leads an all-out attack on Asgard. Thor is overwhelmed and shot down early in the fight. Ares, the god of war, realizes too late that the war is based on lies, and when he turns on Osborn, he is gruesomely ripped in half by the Sentry. And just when things seem at their darkest, Steve Rogers, no longer dead, returns, leading the true Avengers, including Iron Man, Cap, and others, to take the fight directly to Osborn. As the battle escalates, the Sentry fully transforms into the Void, becoming a near unstoppable weapon of destruction. Even the combined power of the Avengers and Asgardians struggle to stop him. He destroys Asgard, bringing the floating city crashing to the ground. Meanwhile, Osborn's Iron Patriot armor is shattered, and his public breakdown ends his reign. Realizing the Sentry can't be saved, Thor is forced to kill his old ally. He uses Mjolnir to finally destroy the Void, killing Bob Reynolds and bringing an end to the madness. With Osborn arrested and his dark reign ended, the true heroes reclaim their place in the Marvel Universe. The end of Siege leads to the Heroic Age. Steve Rogers is offered control of national security, but instead forms a new Avengers initiative, reuniting the classic team. Thor rebuilds Asgard, and the Asgardians settle more peacefully on Earth, and Iron Man and Cap reconcile, setting aside their past to rebuild together. And Norman Osborn is imprisoned, but his influence lingers, laying groundwork for future threats. So the Siege event was a short, explosive, and emotionally charged event that brings closure to years of dark storytelling. It reminds readers why Steve Rogers, Thor, and Tony Stark matter, and provides a satisfying dramatic fall for Norman Osborn's dark empire. If you like your Marvel events with a heavy dose of gothic horror, Curse of the Mutants is right up your alley. This 2010 storyline starts off with a literal bang. A vampire suicide bomber explodes in the middle of San Francisco, infecting dozens of humans and mutants with a vampiric virus. That's right, it's not just a fight against vampires, it's a fight against a plague that's turning people left and right into bloodsuckers. The X-Men are suddenly on the front lines of a supernatural war they never asked for. The big bad here is Zaros, the son of Dracula. He stages a coup against his father, kills him, and unites the fractured vampire clans under his rule. Zaros sees mutants as the perfect new vampire race, strong, beautiful, and with powers that would make his people unstoppable. His plan is to turn the most powerful X-Men into vampires, starting with Jubilee, who becomes one of his first victims. And that personal connection raises the stakes for the entire team. Cyclops, being the strategist he is, doesn't just wait for the vampires to come knocking. He launches a preemptive strike, sending different squads to hit the vampire nation where it hurts. You get some fantastic tactical moments, Wolverine leading brutal assaults, Namor wading through armies of vamps like a one-man tidal wave, and Blade, of course Blade, joining the fight because if there are vampires involved, he's never far behind. Curse of the Mutants turns San Francisco into a full-blown war zone. The X-Men are fighting in the streets, on rooftops, and even underwater against Atlantean vampires. There's this sense that the mutant community is under siege, which gives the story an almost Walking Dead-style survivor horror vibe. The X-Men resurrect Dracula because they need him to take down Zaros. Father and son face off in an epic confrontation, and Dracula quickly reclaims his throne. Jubilee, however, remains a vampire, which becomes a long-running subplot for her character in later comics. This event works because it blends superhero action with classic monster movie energy. It's got betrayal, political drama within the vampire nation, moral dilemmas about curing versus killing, and a rare chance to see the X-Men take on an enemy completely outside their usual mutant-focused stories. It's stylish, scary, and just the right amount of campy. Exactly what a Marvel vampire invasion should be. Shadowland. It's a street-level, gritty saga centered around Daredevil, but this time he is the villain. After years of struggling with crime and corruption in Hell's Kitchen, Daredevil makes a drastic choice. He takes over the Hand, a powerful ninja organization, and uses it to enforce his own brutal version of justice. So after becoming the leader of the Hand, Daredevil initially hopes to use them for good, but the organization's ancient evil influence begins to twist Matt Murdock's mind, corrupting his soul without him even realizing it. Seeking to cleanse Hell's Kitchen, Daredevil builds Shadowland, a massive fortress prison temple in the middle of New York. From there, he and his ninja forces crack down on crime mercilessly, executing criminals without trial. What makes it worse, Daredevil isn't just leading the Hand, he's slowly being possessed by a demonic entity known as the Beast, the dark god the Hand worships. The turning point comes early. Bullseye, Daredevil's longtime nemesis, responsible for killing Elektra and Karen Page, attacks. In cold blood, Daredevil kills Bullseye, and this shocking moment confirms to everyone that Matt Murdock is no longer the man they knew. The execution sends shockwaves throughout New York's street-level heroes. As Daredevil's forces grow more violent, these street-level heroes band together to confront him. Spider-Man tries to reason with him, Luke Cage and Iron Fist lead the charge to bring Matt back, Moon Knight and Misty Knight operate in the shadows, trying to disrupt the Hand's growing influence, and the Punisher, always brutal, sees the Hand as an infestation to be exterminated, and Elektra, with her complex history with both Matt and the Hand, returns to help save him, or kill him if necessary. Meanwhile, Kingpin and Lady Bullseye manipulate events behind the scenes, hoping to seize power amid the chaos. As Shadowland unfolds, it becomes clear Matt Murdock is possessed by the Beast. He builds an army of corrupted ninjas, turning New York streets into a war zone, and Shadowland itself becomes a dark temple of death, radiating evil across the city. Daredevil fights his closest friends. Even Danny Rand, aka Iron Fist, whose she powers could have healed Matt, struggles to reach him. Ultimately, it's not Fist that save Matt, it's words. Foggy Nelson and Elektra manage to break through the Beast's control, reminding Matt of who he really is. Realizing the horror of what he's done, Matt Murdock takes his own life to stop the Beast's influence, though he later survives in secret and goes into exile. With Daredevil gone, Hell's Kitchen is left without a guardian, but not for long. T'Challa, aka the Black Panther, steps in, taking over as the city's protector in Black Panther: The Man Without Fear. Matt Murdock embarks on a journey of redemption, setting the stage for his eventual return to New York, and the Hand retreats, their power broken but not completely destroyed, and the balance of street-level power shifts, affecting characters like Kingpin, Punisher, and Moon Knight. Some praised the event for boldly pushing Daredevil into darker territory, offering an intense emotional ride. And some felt the event was rushed, with the Beast possession twist making Matt's fall feel less personal and more supernatural. Still, street-level heroes like Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Moon Knight gained new relevance through their involvement, and Daredevil's character was profoundly altered, leading into a softer reboot in Daredevil by Mark Waid, focusing on Matt's recovery and lightening his tone. If you thought Marvel's cosmic events couldn't get any weirder after Annihilation and War of Kings, the Thanos Imperative takes that weirdness and cranks it up to 11. The Cancerverse is a twisted parallel universe where death has been completely banished, meaning nothing ever truly dies. It's a nightmare. Heroes and villains are fused with eldritch creatures, and the entire reality is overrun by rotting and dying monstrosities, and that Cancerverse begins bleeding into the main Marvel universe, threatening to replace it entirely. The main villains here are the Revengers. They are corrupted versions of the Avengers, now serving the many angeled ones, basically Marvel's Lovecraftian elder gods. Captain Marvel, aka Marvel, who died heroically decades earlier, is alive again in this reality, but he's a zealot leading an interdimensional crusade to free the Marvel universe from death. To stop this invasion, the Guardians of the Galaxy and the rest of Marvel's cosmic heavy hitters are forced to team up with the unlikeliest of allies, Thanos. Yes, that Thanos. He's the only one who truly understands death, and they need him because the Cancerverse's entire problem is the absence of her. This uneasy alliance is one of the highlights of the event because no one trusts Thanos, and they really shouldn't, but he's their best shot at survival. The battles are brutal, whole fleets are wiped out, and the cosmic war feels endless because the Cancerverse forces just don't stay dead. Star-Lord, Nova, and the Guardians lead desperate hit-and-run missions, while Thanos is unleashed like a living nuke. One of the most metal moments in the event is Thanos finally summoning death back into the Cancerverse, causing the entire reality to start collapsing in on itself. But there's a cost. In the final issue, Star-Lord and Nova stay behind to hold Thanos back long enough for the rest of the heroes to escape. As the Cancerverse implodes, they sacrifice themselves, or so everyone thinks, trapping Thanos and themselves in the dying dimension. It's a bittersweet ending. The universe is saved, but two of Marvel's greatest cosmic heroes are gone, at least for a while. Comics love resurrections. The Cancerverse invasion stands out because it's cosmic horror done right. It's not just another alien army, it's the concept of death itself being removed from the equation, and the absolute nightmare that would follow. The event cemented Star-Lord and Nova as true cosmic legends, pushed Thanos into an ever darker place, and closed out an incredible era of Marvel's cosmic storytelling that started with Annihilation. 1 Month to Live. This story follows a guy named Dennis Sykes. He's no legendary hero or iconic name. He's just a normal person who randomly gets powers after being exposed to toxic materials while trying to stop a crime. But instead of it being a typical origin story, there's a twist. He's diagnosed with aggressive cancer and only has 1 month left to live. What Dennis chooses to do with that time is what carries the entire story. Instead of giving up or trying to save himself, he decides to use his powers to help as many people as possible before he's gone. The catch is that every time he uses those powers, it shortens his already limited time even more. So every heroic act comes with a real cost, and you constantly feel that ticking clock in the background. The story brings in major Marvel heroes, but they are not the focus. They are there to react to Dennis, to witness what he's doing, and honestly, to be inspired by him. Seeing characters who are used to saving the world being affected by a regular guy, making the most out of his final days, adds a lot of emotional weight. It flips the usual dynamic in a really powerful way. Yeah, it's not violent or edgy like some other R-rated ideas, but it's definitely mature. It deals with death, purpose, and what it really means to be a hero. There are moments that feel hopeful, but also moments that hit hard because you know exactly where the story is going. It's one of those stories that stays with you after you're done reading it. As a movie, it's not the easiest sell because the main character isn't sticking around for sequels, but that's also what makes it special. It would be a self-contained story with a clear beginning and end, focused entirely on one person, trying to leave something good behind. And if done right, it could easily be one of the most emotional Marvel adaptations ever. I mean, it doesn't need to be a movie, maybe a Disney Plus special. Chaos War. This war centers on the Chaos King, an ancient force of oblivion seeking to unmake the entire multiverse. It's not just about Earth being in danger, it's about life, death, and existence collapsing across every realm, from Olympus to the afterlife. And at the center of it all, the most unlikely of heroes, Hercules. So the story kicks off when Amatsumi Kabushi, the Japanese god of evil and chaos, transforms into the Chaos King. A being so powerful, he wipes out cosmic entities like the Celestials and abstracts like Eternity's servants. He wants to return the universe to a state of pure nothingness, before time, thought, or gods. And Hercules, after undergoing a power boost that makes him more than just a strong man, assembles a ragtag group of gods, immortals, and dead heroes to stop the end of everything. So think Avengers, but metaphysical. As the Chaos King's influence spreads, death itself breaks, the underworlds collapse, the dead return, and realms of gods are consumed. Even beings like Galactus and the Silver Surfer realize they are completely outmatched. In a haunting moment, death itself flees the battlefield, meaning no one can die anymore. And yet destruction is everywhere. Major figures like Ares, Zeus, and Nightmare fall to the Chaos King, and reality begins to unravel. Hercules' team, including Thor, Silver Surfer, Circe, and even the Hulk, makes a last stand against the impossible. And in a clever twist, Hercules defeats the Chaos King, not through brute strength, but by trapping him in a pocket universe of his own creation. One where the Chaos King gets exactly what he wants, absolute nothingness. So the multiverse is spared, but many gods are gone. Entire realms are destroyed, and even the resurrected heroes don't all return to life, only a select few. So Chaos War is less about politics or vengeance and more about existential horror on a universal scale. It gave Hercules some long overdue depth and redefined the scope of cosmic threat. Deadpool. The story kicks off when Deadpool gets thrown into a psychiatric hospital, supposedly to cure his insanity. But the doctor running the show is actually being manipulated by Psycho Man, a classic Marvel villain who wants to brainwash Deadpool into becoming his personal weapon. Only things don't go as planned as usual. Deadpool's mind is already a mess, and instead of being controlled, he snaps even further. He kills Psycho Man almost immediately and decides that the only way to stop his own suffering and everyone else's is to end the Marvel Universe itself. From there, Wade goes on a killing spree, and it's as chaotic and meta as you'd expect. Deadpool bulldozes through with unpredictability, he tortures the Fantastic Four, tricks Spider-Man long enough to stab him, and even takes out the Avengers in one brutal swoop. What makes it so unsettling is that Deadpool's humor doesn't go away. He's cracking jokes the whole time. But now it's pitch black comedy, as he's murdering the people readers have loved for decades. The kills themselves are ridiculously creative, showing just how much the writers leaned into Deadpool's unpredictability. For example, he takes down the Hulk by waiting until Hulk turns back into Bruce Banner, then slicing his throat before he can transform again. And he even uses pin particles to shrink down and sabotage people from the inside. So you get the gist. But the real kicker is the meta layer. Deadpool knows he's in a comic book, and that fuels his massacre. He realizes that heroes and villains keep fighting, dying, and coming back because the writers won't let them rest. So to him, killing everyone is actually a mercy. It's twisted logic, but it makes a frightening kind of sense. Deadpool's not just fighting the Marvel Universe, he is fighting Marvel Comics itself. The ending pushes that idea even further. After slaughtering basically everyone, Deadpool breaks the fourth wall harder than ever. He sneaks into the real world and confronts the writers and artists who are creating the comic you are reading. His final words are a direct threat to the readers themselves. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe is part slasher story, part parody. It's not about vengeance like Punisher's version, I'm gonna talk about it in a sec, and it's not about power like Thanos. It's about breaking the rules of storytelling itself. Deadpool becomes the ultimate boogeyman of Marvel, because he knows he is not supposed to, and he does it anyway. Age of Ultron starts with the world already lost. This 2013 event wastes no time dropping readers into a nightmare future where Ultron has already taken over the planet. Major cities are in ruins, Ultron drones patrol the skies, and most of Earth's heroes are either dead or in hiding. Right from page 1, it feels less like a superhero story and more like a post-apocalyptic survival tale. The surviving heroes are barely holding on. Hawkeye is doing solo rescue missions, Luke Cage and She-Hulk are running desperate gambits, and Spider-Man is trying not to get caught by Ultron's ever-watchful Sentinels. When the remaining Avengers finally regroup in their underground base, you realize how bad things are. Captain America is demoralized, Iron Man is rattled, and no one has a plan that doesn't sound like suicide. The first half of the event is all about the Resistance trying to figure out how Ultron pulled this off. The big twist: Ultron isn't even on Earth. He's controlling everything remotely through Vision, his original creation. That means there's no single big bad to punch. The heroes come up with a radical idea: send a small team to bargain with Ultron's father, Hank Pym, or take him down before Ultron is ever created. And that's where the story shifts from survival horror to full-on time travel. And this leads to one of the event's boldest moves: Wolverine deciding the only way to stop Ultron is to kill Hank Pym in the past. He teams up with the Invisible Woman and actually does it, which creates an alternate present where the world is ruled by a brutal, fascist version of Tony Stark, and Morgan Le Fay is waging war with magic. This butterfly effect twist is one of the highlights of the event, showing how tampering with time just makes things worse. In the end, the heroes find a compromise. They prevent Ultron's rise, not by erasing Hank Pym, but by having him implant a hidden kill switch inside Ultron's programming when he first builds them. This lets them beat Ultron in the present while keeping the timeline mostly intact. The final scenes are ominous enough. The timeline tampering causes the multiverse to shatter, setting the stage for events like Infinity and Secret Wars 2015. Age of Ultron is without a doubt one of the darkest Marvel events, showing a world where the heroes already lost and clawing back victory comes at enormous cost. It's grim, tense, and gives a spotlight to characters who don't usually get to shape the entire Marvel universe. Plus, it permanently changes the rules of time travel in Marvel Comics, making every future event involving the multiverse feels more dangerous and unstable. Infinity. Spanning across titles like Avengers, New Avengers, and the main Infinity series, this 2013 event tells two massive parallel stories: a cosmic war against an alien empire called the Builders, and a devastating Earth-level invasion led by Thanos himself. So while the Avengers are off-planet dealing with a galactic threat, Thanos uses their absence to invade Earth, searching for his hidden, inhuman son. Meanwhile, in deep space, the ancient alien race known as the Builders has begun systematically destroying entire civilizations, believing that the universe must be purged of flawed life. The Builders are an ancient godlike race responsible for the creation of life in the universe. Now they've determined that Earth is a threat to the cosmic balance and decide to destroy it. And the Avengers, along with the Shi'ar, Kree, Skrulls, and other galactic empires, form an uneasy alliance to stop them. The Builders prove nearly unstoppable, using hyper-advanced technology and nihilistic tactics to destroy entire star systems, and the Avengers ultimately defeat them. With Earth's mightiest heroes fighting in space, Thanos and his Black Order arrive on Earth to demand tribute and soul destruction, leaving the planet vulnerable. The Black Order comprise of Corvus Glaive, Proxima Midnight, Ebony Maw, Supergiant, and Black Dwarf, and the Inhumans led by Black Bolt refuse to give Thanos what he wants. In a last-ditch move, Black Bolt unleashes his voice at full power, causing the destruction of Attilan, the Inhuman capital, and triggering the global spread of the Terrigen Mist, which activates latent Inhuman DNA across Earth, setting up future Inhuman stories. Thane is discovered and captured, but when his powers activate, he kills half of a city instantly and encases Thanos and his Black Order in living amber, freezing them in time. While these larger battles unfold, the Illuminati continue their secret efforts to protect Earth from multiversal destruction, and this ties into the parallel storyline in New Avengers, where inclusions, alternate universes colliding, are beginning to threaten our reality. Although not the main focus of Infinity, these inclusions lay the foundation for the collapse of the multiverse and the eventual events of Secret Wars 2015. So this event introduced the Black Order, now iconic villains, used in both the comics and the MCU's Avengers Infinity War. And one special thing about this event, the artwork is consistently cinematic. Access. Short for Avengers and X-Men Access, it is a 2014 Marvel crossover event. This event takes the classic Marvel theme of moral conflict and flips it on its head. At the heart of Access is the idea of inversion. A magical event causes many of Marvel's most iconic characters to have their moral compasses reversed, turning heroes into tyrants and villains into saviors. The story begins with the Red Skull, who had previously stolen Charles Xavier's brain after his death in Avengers vs. X-Men. Using it, he becomes Red Onslaught, possessing Charles' psychic powers, but using them to spread hate, and control minds globally. The Avengers and X-Men team up to stop him, but the Red Onslaught proves too powerful. He mind controls key heroes, sows chaos, and unleashes adamantium sentinels, designed specifically to kill superhumans. Desperation forces the heroes to call on unlikely allies, villains like Loki, Carnage, Deadpool, Sabretooth, and Enchantress to help save the world. And to stop the Red Onslaught, Scarlet Witch and Doctor Doom cast a massive magical spell, a moral inversion intended to suppress the Red Skull's evil. But the spell backfires. Instead of just affecting the Red Skull, the magic surges outward and inverts the personalities of everyone present. Heroes become cold, ruthless, and authoritarian, and villains suddenly find themselves altruistic, noble, and even heroic. And this includes characters like Iron Man, who becomes arrogant and morally bankrupt, unleashing the Extremis app to rewrite people's biology for a price. Sam Wilson as Captain America becomes ruthlessly aggressive, punishing threats without hesitation. Thor is brutish and uncaring, and meanwhile villains like Carnage and Sabretooth become gentle and self-sacrificing. And Carnage even tries to become a Spider-Man-style hero. With inverted personalities, many heroes begin taking over the world in the name of order, and the inverted villains form their own team to stop the heroes. And the few uninverted heroes and villains must gather together to undo the spell and set things right. Eventually, Scarlet Witch and Doom cast another spell, and this time properly reversing the inversion for most characters, but not all effects are undone. At the end of the event, some characters remain inverted, creating long-term changes. Iron Man stays inverted for a time, becoming Superior Iron Man, a more manipulative and morally grey version of himself. Sabretooth, now noble and guilt-ridden, becomes more like Wolverine trying to redeem himself, and Red Skull is left in a fractured state. While the core concept was widely praised for its creativity and unpredictability, some critics felt the execution was rushed or uneven, and that character behavior was exaggerated for shock value. Spider-Verse. It is one of the most ambitious and beloved Marvel crossover events, published from 2014 to 2015. The event spans multiple Spider-Man titles and tie-ins, and centers around the idea that every Spider-Person across the Marvel multiverse is being hunted, and only by uniting can they hope to survive. It's a celebration of decades of Spider-Man history. Pulling in hundreds of variants, Spider-Verse delivers both fan service and high stakes, built around a new cosmic level threat that wants to erase every spider-powered being from existence. So across the multiverse, a family of vampiric beings, known as the Inheritors, are hunting down and feeding on spider totems, the mystical spider-powered beings of every dimension. The Inheritors consume the life force of spider heroes, and they don't just want to feed, they want to wipe them all out. The Inheritors include Morlun, the most infamous, who previously terrorized Earth 616 Spider-Man, Solus, the Patriarch and leader of the Inheritors, Deimos, Verna, Jinx, and Karn. Each has their own method of slaughter, and as the Inheritors jump between universes killing Spider-Man and Spider-Woman, it becomes clear this is a multiversal extinction event. So realizing they're being hunted, Spider-People from across the multiverse begin to gather. Key members include Peter Parker from Earth 616, Spider-Gwen from Earth 65, Miles Morales from Earth 1610, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, Spider-Man 2099, Penny Parker, and dozens more. There's also Silk, a new character from Earth 616 who shares Peter's origin and is one of the special totems the Inheritors seek. Together they form a spider army. It is later revealed that the Inheritors are hunting three key spider totems tied to a prophecy: the Bride, Silk, whose presence drives Morlun into a frenzy; the other, a primal spider entity associated with death and rebirth; and Benji Parker, the infant son of Spider-Girl, Mayday Parker, who represents the future. The Inheritors believe that by killing these three, they can shatter the web of life and destiny, the mystical structure connecting all spider beings, and end the spider lineage forever. Eventually, the heroes mount a final assault on Loomworld, the Inheritors' home dimension. With the help of Karn, the black sheep of the Inheritor family who turns on his kind, the spider army traps the Inheritors on a radioactive world, Earth 1345, where they can no longer feed. Karn then becomes the New Weaver, a cosmic guardian of the web of life and destiny, tasked with maintaining balance across the Spider-Verse. This event led to Spider-Gwen's solo success and more prominence for characters like Silk and Miles Morales, and was the first large-scale glimpse of the multiversal nature of Spider-Man before Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse made it mainstream. Civil War 2. It's a spiritual sequel to the original Civil War that came out in 2006. This story explores a more philosophical and emotional divide, one rooted not in government control like the first one, but in predictive justice. So the story pits Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, against Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. as they find themselves on opposite sides of a moral dilemma involving a new inhuman with the power to see the future. This inhuman named Ulysses has the extraordinary ability to foresee future events with seemingly perfect accuracy. When Ulysses predicts a devastating celestial invasion, the heroes act on his vision, and they succeeded in stopping the attack before it happens. And this event sparks a philosophical debate. Captain Marvel believes Ulysses' visions can save lives and should be used to prevent crimes and disasters before they occur. And Iron Man argues that predicting the future isn't the same as knowing it, and acting on visions that may not come true is dangerous and unethical. And this ideological clash escalates into a full-blown war between two factions of heroes, each with their own view on whether the future should be controlled or left unknown. In one of the first major battles against Thanos, acting on a Ulysses prediction, War Machine is killed and She-Hulk is critically wounded, and this deeply affects both Carol, Rhodey's partner, and Tony, his best friend, pushing the rift further. Tony, trying to understand how Ulysses' visions work, abducts and studies him, discovering that his powers are based on data, probability, and simulation, not certainty. Ulysses predicts that Bruce Banner will kill everyone. Acting on this, Carol and the other heroes confront Banner, and Hawkeye kills him, claiming Banner asked him to if he ever lost control. Hawkeye is put on trial, further dividing the superhero community. Ulysses has another vision, Miles Morales killing Steve Rogers on the steps of the Capitol. Carol moves to detain Miles for his protection, while Tony insists on letting Miles make his own choices. The escalation conflict leads to a climatic battle between Carol and Tony, and during the fight, Danvers unleashes a powerful energy blast that puts Tony into a coma. Though not dead, Tony is left in a vegetative state, being kept alive by his own technology. In the aftermath, Captain Marvel is hailed as a hero by the government, receiving expanded authority in intergalactic defense, and Tony Stark is replaced by AI Tony, who helps mentor Riri Williams, aka Ironheart. And the superhero community is deeply fractured once again, with many questioning how far they should go to prevent future tragedies. So, unlike the original Civil War, which was more political, this story is more philosophical and personal, challenging heroes not just on what they fight for, but why. And while Civil War II had high ambitions, it received mixed to negative reviews, with many fans feeling it lacked the narrative weight and emotional impact of its predecessor. Criticisms include character inconsistencies, over-reliance on shock value, and that the event existed to set up new titles rather than stand on its own. Thanos wins. It explores one of the scariest ideas in Marvel history. What if Thanos actually succeeded? The story takes readers into a future where Thanos finally wiped out most life in the universe and became exactly what he always wanted to be, the ultimate bringer of death. Entire civilizations are gone, heroes are dead, and the universe itself feels empty and exhausted. At first, it sounds like the kind of outcome Thanos always dreamed about, but the terrifying part is that even after achieving almost everything, he still isn't satisfied. Instead of peace or fulfillment, he's left sitting alone in a dying universe, realizing that his obsession never truly made him happy. The comic becomes even darker because of the horrifying versions of Marvel characters living in the future. Cosmic Ghost Rider ends up serving Thanos after becoming twisted by years of endless violence and tragedy. Meanwhile, Hulk suffers one of the weirdest and most disturbing fates in the story, transformed into a broken monster controlled by Thanos' influence. Everywhere you look, the universe feels corrupted by years of despair and cruelty. After spending his life obsessed with impressing Lady Death, he eventually understands that he can never actually join her unless he dies himself. That realization drives the story into an even darker direction as Thanos starts searching for a way to end his own existence. So despite the title, the comic is really about the emptiness that comes after achieving total victory through destruction. And what really makes Thanos wins memorable is the realization at the center of it all: Thanos can never truly win. Immortal Hulk. This comic completely reinvented Hulk as a horror character instead of just a giant superhero who smashes things. The series starts with one terrifying idea: Bruce Banner can never truly die. Every time he dies, the Hulk comes back somehow, usually at night, almost like a monster from a horror movie. Right away, the comic feels darker and more unsettling than most Marvel stories. The Hulk isn't treated like an action hero here. He's treated like something lurking in the shadows, waiting to emerge. And the transformations are painful, grotesque, and genuinely creepy, with twisted body horror that made readers uncomfortable in the best way possible. The story dives deep into Bruce Banner's trauma, abuse, fear, and fractured mind. Different Hulk personalities constantly fight for control, making Bruce feel less like a person and more like a broken system barely holding together. Then the story introduces horrifying concepts connected to gamma radiation and something called the Below Place. Suddenly, Hulk's stories stop being about science accidents and become cosmic horror. There are scenes involving mutated bodies, people grotesquely transformed transforming from gamma exposure and terrifying immortal creatures that feel closer to horror monsters than superheroes. And the craziest part about the Immortal Hulk is that beneath all the horror, it still understands Bruce Banner emotionally. The comic constantly reminds readers that the Hulk exists because Bruce spent his entire life suffering and trying to survive. That emotional core makes the disturbing moments hit even harder. You're not watching monsters fight, you are watching someone trapped in endless cycles of trauma, rage, and rebirth. And that's why many fans consider it one of the best and darkest Marvel stories ever made. Infinity Wars. Again, this time, it's not Thanos snapping his fingers or Adam Warlock wrestling with morality. Instead, the war is kicked off by someone far more surprising, Gamora. Tired of being manipulated and haunted by her past, she sets out on a mission to fix everything, even if it means breaking the universe itself in the process. It all begins when Thanos is assassinated in the opening issue, not by a cosmic force or a hero, but by Gamora, now calling herself Requiem. With Thanos out of the way, she seeks to gather the 6 Infinity Stones for herself. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Iron Man, and others try to keep the stones safe by forming the Infinity Watch. But Gamora is always one step ahead. Once she acquires all 6 stones, she uses them not to destroy, but to reshape. And by that, I mean folding the universe in half. And this leads to one of the event's most unique twists, the Wrapped Universe. Using the stones, Gamora combines pairs of heroes into single beings. Spider-Man and Moon Knight become Arachnite, Iron Man and Thor become Iron Hammer, and so on. And this bizarre matchup reality creates entirely new personalities, backstories, and threats. And while fascinating, the wrapped world is unstable and soon begins to collapse. Even Gamora realizes that wielding absolute power doesn't guarantee peace, only more complications. And the situation spirals as Loki tries to manipulate the wrapped universe for his own ends, revealing that the Infinity Stones are part of a much larger cosmic structure. Eventually, with the help of Adam Warlock and the surviving heroes, Gamora gives up the stones and tries to make amends. But the damage is already done. The wrapped heroes now exist as their own reality, and the multiverse has been further fractured. The Infinity Stones scatter once more, but not before setting the stage for even deeper cosmic lore. So Infinity Wars isn't your typical big bad threatens the universe kind of story, and here Gamora isn't evil, she's broken and desperate, and that makes her all the more dangerous. And while the wrapped universe was short-lived, it offered a fresh, creative twist on familiar faces. War of the Realms. By the time the story opens, Malekith has conquered 9 of the 10 realms. Dark elves, frost giants, fire demons, undead armies, trolls, every ancient enemy of Asgard is united under one banner. Earth or Midgard is the final prize. It's not just a raid, it's a full extinction plan, and the villain lineup alone feels like the end of mythology itself. Malekith doesn't just invade Earth, he surgically dismantles it. He sends dragons after Iron Man, takes Thor and Odin out of the picture, and then unleashes his armies across the planet at the same time. New York becomes a war zone in minutes, Loki appears to betray Malekith, only to be killed, and civilians are slaughtered while heroes scramble to evacuate survivors. The scariest part, the Avengers don't even realize the entire world is under attack. They think it's just another city crisis. The Avengers are beaten so badly, they are forced to retreat to Antarctica. New York is officially lost, Odin is wounded, the Valkyries are slaughtered, and Doctor Strange can barely hold reality together. And the heroes finally understand that this isn't a battle they can brute force. This is a planetary occupation. Instead of one big counterattack, the heroes splinter into desperate suicide missions. Freyja sends teams into enemy dimensions to assassinate giant kings, destroy war engines, and sabotage Malekith's Black Bifrost. Spider-Man ends up fighting frost giants, Captain Marvel leads space-level assaults, and the X-Men defend the last human strongholds in New York. Thor finally escapes captivity and comes back to Earth changed, calmer, heavier, and carrying the weight of every fallen realm. He challenges Malekith directly, while the Avengers push back into invading forces worldwide. The war spills into places like Australia, Asia, Latveria, and even heaven itself as Angela wipes out the Queen of Heaven. And the final battle takes place at Stonehenge. Thor uses an unthinkable strategy to finally defeat Malekith, sacrificing pieces of himself and everything he believes in. Entire dimensions are in ruins. Gods are dead. Heroes are broken. When the dust settles, the realms are technically saved, but nothing is the same. The Kindred Saga. It started with massive promise. During Nick Spencer's run on The Amazing Spider-Man, Marvel introduced a terrifying new villain named Kindred, a demonic figure who clearly knew Peter Parker on a deeply personal level. From the beginning, this villain wasn't just another bad guy trying to rob a bank or rule the city. He wanted to break Peter, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. The character felt dangerous in a way Spider-Man villains rarely do, and fans were instantly hooked. One of the most shocking elements of the early story is that Kindred kills Peter Parker multiple times and brings him back to life as part part of a twisted revenge game. These deaths aren't played as simple fake-outs, they are part of the punishment. Peter is forced to relive failure, guilt, and fear over and over again, while Kindred watches. The tone is dark, psychological, and cruel in a way that genuinely felt fresh. For a while, it looked like Marvel was building toward one of the most personal Spider-Man villains ever created, and for months, the series teased one huge mystery. Who is Kindred? The story drops hints non-stop, dialogue full of emotional history, references to Peter's past sins, broken friendships, buried guilt. Eventually, the reveal lands. He is Harry Osborn, Peter's best friend. On paper, that's a strong twist. Harry coming back as a supernatural nightmare, haunting Peter makes perfect emotional sense. The problem is, that's not where the story actually drops. In a baffling second twist, Marvel then reveals that Kindred is actually tied to Gabrielle and Sarah Stacy, the infamous characters from the hated Since Past storyline. These kids were introduced as the secret kids of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn, a retcon fans already despised. Then the story twists again, revealing those two weren't really Gwen's kids after all. They were clones created by an AI copy of Harry Osborn, who manipulated everything behind the scenes to psychologically torture Peter. Yes, the villain is now an AI ghost, controlling clone demons, pretending to be people who might not even be real. And that's where the biggest failure hits. Nothing makes coherent sense anymore. Kindred had godlike, supernatural powers, reality-wrapping abilities, and full control over death itself. But this story never clearly explains how. The emotional through line becomes buried under layers of retcons stacked on top of retcons. Fans who followed the mystery for years suddenly felt like the payoff had been rewritten at the last minute. What started as a tight psychological horror story ended as a tangled web of half-explanations and continuity gymnastics. By the time the saga finally ends, the reaction from readers is almost universal. The build-up was great, and the payoff was a disaster. It resurrected one of Spider-Man's most hated retcons since past, didn't fully commit to reversing it, introduced sci-fi logic that broke its own supernatural rules, and left major emotional beats unresolved. And instead of becoming one of Spider-Man's greatest modern arcs, it became one of his most confusing. Marvel had a great villain, a strong emotional hook, and years of reader investment, and somehow still fumbled the landing. Null Invasion. This event starts with Null, the god of the symbiotes, waking up from his long nap and deciding it's time to take back the universe. Forget small-scale alien invasions. This dude brings an army of symbiote dragons with him and blots out the sun. Within the first issue, Earth is completely smothered in living darkness, and most of Marvel's heavy hitters are either possessed, down for the count, or running for their lives. Right away, you know this is a different kind of event because it doesn't waste time with the build-up. Null lands on Earth, rips through Sentry like he's nothing, and stakes him for everyone to see. That's the kind of statement you make when you want to tell the heroes, yup, this is going to hurt. You've got symbiote-infected celestials marching across the sky, dragons tearing up Manhattan, and even people like Captain America and Wolverine getting taken over by Null's hive. Eddie Brock, Venom himself, is the heart of the story, which is what makes King in Black feel so satisfying. He's not just fighting to protect the planet, he's fighting for his son Dylan, who has unique powers that can hurt Null. Eddie spends much of the event outmatched and nearly broken, both physically and emotionally, and it's that underdog journey that gives the event its emotional punch. The heroes aren't totally sidelined though. You get some amazing team-up moments, like Iron Man using a symbiote-controlled Celestial as a giant mech suit, Blade rallying the Vampire Nation to fight the symbiotes, and the X-Men teleporting in with a full squad to join the battle. Everyone is desperate, and everyone is throwing everything they've got at Null. By the end, Eddie bonds with the Enigma Force, aka the God of Light, and becomes a living cosmic weapon. Armed with a massive energy sword, he takes the fight straight to Null and actually wins, cutting the God of Symbiotes in half and ending his reign. It's one of the most cathartic and visually stunning Marvel finales in recent memory, with Eddie rising from anti-hero to full-on cosmic savior. King in Black is unapologetically huge. It's dark fantasy, horror, superhero spectacle, and a redemption story all rolled into one. Children of Atom. When Marvel launched this comic book, the timing already felt strange. This was during the Krakoa era, when mutants were finally thriving again, and dozens of classic X-Men characters were active, powerful, and full of potential. Fans were already asking Marvel to give spotlight to forgotten mutants who had been sitting in the background for years. And instead of doing that, Marvel introduced a brand new team of teenage heroes that no one asked for. Right out of the gate, many readers were already skeptical. The biggest hook of the series was the reveal that these kids weren't actually mutants at all. They were normal humans using experimental technology to imitate the powers of famous X-Men like Cyclops, Wolverine, Magneto, and more. On paper, that might sound like an interesting idea, but in execution, it immediately felt hollow. Fans weren't excited to read about people pretending to be mutants when real mutants with far better stories were already waiting for attention. The characters themselves didn't help the situation. Instead of feeling unique or fresh, most of them came across as shallow copies of heroes we already know and love. Their powers were borrowed, their designs felt generic, and their personalities didn't stand out enough to justify replacing actual X-Men with decades of history behind them. Many readers described the book as feeling less like an official Marvel story and more like someone's fanfiction pitch that accidentally made it to print. One character in particular, Buddy, became a major source of frustration. Her behavior toward the mutant community made a lot of readers uneasy, yet the story still expected the audience to sympathize with her. Instead of exploring the psychological implications in a serious way, the comic brushed over them, which made the situation feel awkward rather than meaningful, and the disconnect between what the book showed and how it wanted us to feel was impossible to ignore. Another big reason fans rejected Children of Autumn is that it felt completely pointless in the long run. The team didn't change the mutant status quo, it didn't introduce a groundbreaking villain, it didn't lead to major consequences, and just like many critics predicted from the start, the characters quietly fell into obscurity not long after the series ended. For a book that took up space during such an important era for the X-Men, its impact was shockingly small. It was a missed opportunity, at best, and a tonal misfire at worst. Instead of celebrating mutants during one of their strongest eras, it distracted from them with characters that felt artificial and unnecessary. It's not hated because it was shocking or offensive, it's hated because it felt soulless, disposable, and completely disconnected from what fans actually wanted from X-Men comics at the time. AXE Judgment Day. It's a major crossover event from 2022. It brings together three powerful forces in the Marvel Universe: the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Eternals, in a war that quickly transforms into an apocalyptic moral reckoning. The story begins with the Eternals discovering that mutants are essentially excess deviation, a term used by Eternal programming to identify things that must be purged. Mutants now living on the sentient island of Krakoa have mastered resurrection technology through the Five, allowing them to bring any mutant back to life. To the Eternals, this is a violation of natural law, so Druig, the scheming Prime Eternal, sees the opportunity to declare war on the mutants. Druig wants to solidify his power and frames the war as fulfilling the Eternals' holy programming, ordering their forces, including powerful Eternal war machines called the Hex, to wipe out Krakoa and destroy mutant resurrection. As the war escalates, the Avengers are drawn into the chaos, trying to prevent mass extinction. In desperation, Iron Man, Ajax, and Mr. Sinister hatch a radical plan to resurrect a dead Celestial, specifically the Progenitor, and program it with their values to act as a mediator between Eternals, humans, and mutants. The Celestial awakens, but it doesn't mediate. Instead, it announces that it will judge all of Earth, deciding whether humanity as a whole deserves to survive. Every individual, hero, villain, or civilian will be judged based on their morality, choices, and worth, and they have 24 hours. One by one, the Celestial visits individuals and renders personal judgments. It's not about power or legacy, but who they are at their core. Captain America is judged unworthy, so despite his efforts to be a good man, the Celestial sees him as ineffective at changing the world. Cyclops is judged worthy, Iron Man fails, Jean Grey passes, and even everyday people are judged, some pass, other fails, with no clear pattern or logic. The Celestial's looming presence terrifies the planet, and as it seems poised to judge Earth unworthy, mass panic breaks out. The heroes realize that the Celestial is going to destroy Earth, and in a moment of rare unity, Avengers, X-Men, Eternals, and even villains come together to try to stop it. In the climax, a small group enters the Celestial's mind, confronting aspects of his judgment and arguing for humanity's right to grow and change. Ajax, who had helped resurrect the Celestial, ultimately sacrifices herself, merging with the Progenitor to reshape its judgment and give Earth a second chance. So the Celestial dies, but its judgment leaves deep scars, not physically but emotionally. Druig is dethroned after failing to lead the Eternals, and Uranus, the ancient Eternal Warlord, is imprisoned once again. But his short appearance devastated planets and showed how truly dangerous he is. Ajax resurrects as Ajax Celestia, a new divine being, possibly replacing the Celestials with a god made by and for Earth's people. The Eternals begin to rethink their purpose, now unbound from blind obedience, and Krakoa survives, but its vulnerability is now known, and the relationship between Eternals, mutants, and humans is forever altered, with mutual trauma and new respect. Zeb Wells' Amazing Spider-Man. When Zeb Wells took over Spider-Man, things actually looked promising at first. The mystery around what Peter did, the darker tone, and the reset status quo got people curious. But as the run went on, that curiosity quickly turned into frustration. The pacing dragged. Mysteries stretched for way too long, and it made readers feel like they were being led nowhere. What started as okay, let's see where this goes, slowly became why is this still going? Spider-Man is supposed to struggle, yeah, but this run pushed him into constant failure, with almost no payoff. He's broke, isolated, gets beaten down repeatedly, and is treated like a screw-up by pretty much everyone around him. Instead of feeling relatable, it started to feel excessive. Fans didn't mind Peter struggling, but they did mind that he never seemed to grow or recover from it. The most controversial part of the run, easily what happened with Mary Jane. Out of nowhere, MJ is in a relationship with a guy named Paul, and they are raising kids together. This came out of storyline involving a weird alternate dimension, and it just didn't sit right with fans. Not only did it sideline one of the most important relationships in Spider-Man history, but it also felt rushed and poorly explained. This was the moment the run completely lost the fans. Plus, this run heavily relied on mystery boxes, especially the whole "what did Peter do" setup, but there was no satisfying reveal. The payoff felt underwhelming compared to the build-up, and it kinda reminded people of the Kindred storyline from the previous run, but with even less clarity. When a story keeps teasing something big and then doesn't deliver, it leaves readers feeling like their time was wasted, and that's exactly what happened in this case. By the time this run was deep into its issues, the backlash was everywhere. Fans weren't just criticizing specific moments, they were frustrated with the overall direction. The constant suffering, the controversial relationship changes, and the lack of satisfying payoffs made it feel like Spider-Man was stuck in a loop with no progress, and for a character as beloved as Peter, that's the worst thing you can do. Jason Aaron's Punisher. Here, Frank, instead of being the lone vigilante waging his war on crime, Frank joins the Hand, a ninja cult, and becomes their leader, basically their ultimate weapon. In exchange, they bring his wife Maria back to life. From that point on, Frank isn't just killing criminals, he's working for a supernatural organization and serving something called the Beast. It's a huge shift from grounded street justice to full-on mystical storyline. Frank Castle's entire identity is built on one thing: his family is dead, and nothing will bring them back, and he accepts that. That's what fuels his war. But in this run, he does the exact opposite. He agrees to bring Maria back, serves the Hand, and basically reshapes his entire mission around that choice. And this wasn't just a creative risk. This was a misunderstanding of the character, because traditionally, Frank would never cross that line no matter how much he suffers. Then comes one of the most controversial parts of the run, the retcon involving Maria. The story suggests that before the tragedy in the park, she was actually planning to leave Frank and divorce him. Not a week before, not months before, literally that same day. And that changes the emotional core of the Punisher's origin, turning it into a random act of tragedy into something more awkward and less impactful. By the end of the run, things go even further. Maria rejects Frank, calls him out, takes his money, and basically tears him down emotionally. Meanwhile, the Avengers step in, Doctor Strange gets involved, and everything turns even more supernatural. Frank ends up losing everything: his identity, his mission, even the Punisher name. He literally disappears from Earth and ends up in another world, no longer using guns, no longer being the Punisher, just Frank Castle with a completely different life. So yeah, the biggest issue with Jason Aaron's run isn't just the weird ideas, it's that it feels like it goes against everything the character stands for. The Punisher works because he's grounded, stubborn, and unchanging in his beliefs. This run takes all that and flips it. Supernatural powers, working for the Hand, rewriting his past, removing his identity. It just didn't feel like Frank Castle anymore. And when fans say this run ruined the Punisher, what they really mean is it stopped feeling like the Punisher at all. Blood Hunt. It kicks off like Marvel deciding to hit the emergency button on Earth 616. The sky goes black worldwide, not a storm, not an eclipse, but a straight-up, supernatural blackout that bolts out the sun, which is basically the go signal for every empire on Earth to start moving openly. What makes it scarier is the method. Dark Force users, people tied to the Dark Force dimension, start exploding or rupturing into portals, like living breach points that help flood the world with darkness. So this isn't Vampires Got Brave. This is a coordinated operation with a magical science backbone, and it immediately turns cities into fearing grounds. Once the darkness hits, vampires don't just attack one place. We are talking global. You see outbreaks across countries, chaos in the streets, and heroes realizing this isn't a random rise, it's an invasion. The event flexes hard by showing that even Doom treats this like a real threat, but also like something he planned for. Latveria has a nope field. Vampires crossing the border burst into flames, which is such a Doom move. My nation is safe, the rest of you figure it out. Meanwhile, the heroes are trying to triage the world falling apart in real time. stop the attacks, stop the breaches, stop the panic, and figure out who is coordinating this. The Avengers try to respond like they always do and get overwhelmed, and the reason is the Blood Coven, basically a squad of ultra-dangerous vampires built to fight superhumans. They target symbols, taking down and capturing major heroes like Thor, Wanda, and Black Panther in the main series, because breaking the world's defenders psychologically is part of the war plan. The message is clear: your gods and icons can bleed too. And that's when you realize this event isn't about Dracula doing Dracula things. It's something bigger and way more organized. The sickest pivot early on is that Blade appears to be the guy with the plan, until he isn't. He links up with Strange and Clea, talks like the expert, and then boom, he betrays them, revealing he's at the center of the nightmare. If the one guy who should be vampire-proof is compromised, then anyone can be compromised. The heroes start realizing this isn't just Blade went evil either. There's something wearing Blade, using his rep, his skills, and his access to move pieces around the board while everyone is distracted by the surface-level vampire apocalypse. Eventually, the mask comes off. The mastermind is Varnai, the first vampire, basically the original source code of vampirism returning to claim the world. That's why everything feels larger than vampire politics. The ritual stuff, the temple, the dark force flood, this is an ancient plan reaching its endgame. On the hero side, you get the best kind of Marvel desperation alliance. Dracula reluctantly helping because Blade and Varnai threatens his entire vampire nation too. And then the other nuclear twist. Dr. Doom steps in, offers a solution, and demands the thing he always wants: power and authority. Doom maneuvers into becoming Sorcerer Supreme, and you know this is going to be a problem later. The last stretch is basically everyone throwing their best shot while the world is suffocating. The heroes need the darkness gone, the vampire chain of command broken, and Blade saved, while Varnai is trying to evolve into something even worse. The resolution is a mix of bloodline weakness, with Blade's daughter being the key, and heroes making ugly choices, and Doom performing some kind of magic. The darkness recedes, the immediate apocalypse ends, and Doom immediately flips the script. He doesn't just save the world, he claims credit and keeps the mantle, setting up the political magical fallout that rolls straight into one world under Doom. Fury Max, My War Gone By. As the name suggests, the story is about Nick Fury, and it's written by Garth Ennis, and it throws away the cool spy image and shows you a version of Fury that feels way more human, and way more messed up. This isn't the polished leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., this is a soldier shaped by decades of war, addiction, and choices that don't sit right even with him. The story places Fury in real-world conflicts after World War II, so you're not dealing with aliens or supervillains here. This is about actual wars, political agendas, and operations that live in moral gray areas. Fury works alongside intelligence agencies, gets involved in things he probably shouldn't, and keeps chasing that feeling of being in a justified war, even when deep down he knows that kind of war might not exist anymore. What really stands out here is Fury himself. He drinks too much, he talks rough, he makes reckless decisions, and he leans into his worst instincts more often than he should. But at the same time, you can tell there's something underneath all that. He's not just doing this for fun, he's stuck. War is the only thing that ever made sense to him, and now he's constantly searching for that same clarity in a world that doesn't offer it anymore. The tone is heavy and grounded, similar to a war drama more than a superhero story. There's violence, but it's not flashy, it's a bit more realistic. There's also a lot of focus on consequences, both physically and mentally. You start to see how years of conflict slowly wear Fury down, shaping him into someone who doesn't really know how to exist outside of it. As an R-rated movie, this could be something completely different for Marvel. Think less superhero blockbuster and more intense character study. And yeah, putting Samuel L. Jackson in a version of this story would go crazy, but it would need to fully commit to that darker, grounded tone. No holding back, no softening edges, just a deep dive into a man who spent his entire life at war and doesn't know how to stop.